Hey, what's going on? This is the OG Kickoff, a Double Down and Next Round media production. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, when I threw out the possibility of Marcus Freeman following the 2023 Jim Harbaugh path, little did I realize that someone in Ann Arbor would just beat him to the punch, and the joke would kind of be made by everybody. And hand up, did not see that coming. Dusty May apparently did.
Look, we forgot that Michigan was the ultimate stepping stool job, right? Anyone gets the Michigan job and their goal is to win a national championship, immediately bolt to the pro leagues. So we spent too much time talking about South Bend. We should have been talking about Ann Arbor and how nobody really wants to live there.
Apparently not. Goodness gracious, man. Yeah, that's stunning to see that. And I know there are a lot of people wondering, like, oh, is this just how big time college sports are going to be? It's like, maybe it was just specific to a situation until we see a bunch of head coaches actually go the route of championship to NFL, or win an NCAA tournament and go straight to the NBA. Probably shouldn't assume that it's everybody, but noteworthy nonetheless. Who knows? Maybe Marcus Freeman's going to be like, well, Dusty May kind of already did it, so I think I'll just stick around here and enjoy my time in South Bend, a place that everybody loves, right?
Yeah. And I mean, just to be the voice of reason here, right? Michigan is so freaking wealthy, right? I mean, if it was a money thing, he would be at Michigan, considering what they've done for Bryce Underwood and some others, having just brought a national championship there. I have no doubts that their fundraising efforts. I think that bringing in Masai Ujiri, the famous Raptors GM, to be kind of their Pobo over there, and then also working with Cooper Flagg can't be understated, where going to a great situation in the NBA, there's nothing like it, right? Where you could just kind of say, hey, give that guy the ball. We got a great fan base. We got no state tax. Let's let it ride. Like, this is the type of situation that you'd be praying for the next 10 years if it were to come about.
I think Dusty May is a really good coach. Fellow Indiana grad. All right. I'm not going to hate on a fellow Indiana grad.
You guys are just sleeper cells, man. And so we're going to find out that the whole government's just run by y'all.
Let me just say this. What if, and this is where my cynical brain went, and I'll tie it back to college football, I promise. What if Dusty May thought to himself, am I potentially Mike Norvell? Am I potentially the guy that has built an unbelievable roster at Michigan via the portal, which a lot of people are complaining about? Whatever, it's the new day and age. And am I just perhaps a cycle or two away from all of a sudden being compared to Mike Norvell? Like, is there that possibility that was in his brain? Because as much as I think that coaches are just so paranoid and they always think that they're about to get fired if they lose a couple of games, there is something a little bit more real in college basketball, more so than college football, with the way that you have to recruit rosters now, how much variance there could be. I think he's a really good coach, and I think he would probably be fine. But I wonder if he thought for a moment, is there a possibility that I'm just competing against myself? And if you rely on the portal a lot, maybe there's a little bit more variance. I don't know.
I think that's part of it, having to adjust. I think part of it is, it's the in vogue thing to say, state of the sport. What are you going to do? Who would want to coach? This isn't the way it was when I was coming up. And I think some of the legislation that we saw come through actually kind of right after that about the, 5 years of eligibility and all that starts to clean that up. And I think we've truly seen the bottom of everyone just looking around going, the state of the sport. You can excuse any behavior now by just saying state of the sport. What are you going to do?
Or possibly he just saw, ooh, Cooper Flagg's over there.
That's what it is. It's that you don't have to lose that guy. Well, never know about the Dallas Mavericks.
True. He could be on the chopping block within 2 or 3 years, knowing how they operate. Anyway, we have a great pod lined up. We have Tony Catalina, first-time guest who covers A&M for 24/7 Sports. Great interview, digging into all things Aggies with him. And we have Lad of the Week. But first, Will, we're doing something new. And we need to come up with a clear name for this, because over the course of the last 5-6 days, there's been some discourse about this potential name. I wanted to dig into something that is thought about but not addressed by college football fans. Simply put, which program is having the worst time of anyone in the 2020s? This is essentially the meme come to life of, bro, I'm straight up not having a good time. That's what this is in college football. I think group of 5 teams are excluded from this group, because while I'd love to discuss UMass and their 7-57 record in the 2020s, I think there's a certain level of apathy that group of five fans have accepted just because you're not in the top tier of power conference. So like, I don't want to say, I do think that you need to be a certain level of committed to your program to be in that we are not having a good time camp. So I want to get that out there. We will not be discussing group of five teams today, but
And shout out UCF, who has specifically started the decade in a great spot in the group of five, and then now ended up in a version of hell by getting out of the group of five. Kind of goes to show that.
yeah, and look, I actually didn't have UCF as one of those teams to discuss for this, maybe in part because they started off the decade so well. We can add it to the end if you want. We can. Didn't think that you were going to hit me with a team I did not have mentioned here, but I came up with a name originally of Duck of the Decade for this team because when I think of duck in a football sense, it's an awful, underwhelming throw, and you drop back to pass, you have expectations, and boop, it's a duck. Upon further consideration, per both Will and Lauren, the two people that I discuss these types of things with more than anybody, uh, I realized that there are potentially some better names on the table, and probably the mascot of the team that I picked to win a national championship is maybe
That
not
was
the
more
best
of
way
my
to go.
pushback is Phil Knight's going to be at your door if we're using duck pejoratively, right?
Right, you're probably right. So, Will, we can either name this the dud of the decade, or as Lauren brought up, the deuce of the decade. I will let you decide.
My pick was dud. I feel like there's some
Let's do it.
expectations with a dud. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? It's like a firework, you know. No, you a big fireworks guy, Connor?
I'm not, and Lauren wants me to be.
Interesting. Well, this won't surprise you. Growing up, my mom was a big fireworks gal, maybe the largest in the state of Louisiana. We grew up some bayou land, and we were always blowing stuff up. That was how we spent time. It's a little bit of a fantasy factory type situation, a little Rob Deerdick we had going on. We would like build stuff and blow it up, and so there was nothing scarier or more disappointing than when you buy the nice firework and it goes to the bottom and it's just, psst, and it's like, what do we do now? You know, do we throw it in the lake? Do we go stay away from it? Do we go somewhere else? So a dud just ruins your time.
Lauren handed me one of those mail-in coupon things for, I don't know, I was like Phantom Fireworks, one of those brands or something like that. And she goes, save this in case for 4th of July for us. I'm thinking to myself, we have never done this before. What is this the direction you want us to be going in? Like, is this something that you want to be part of our 4th of July plans? We've done other things like that before, but I'm talking the buy 8, get 7 free, whatever the coupon is type thing that you see, and you're just thinking to yourself, those people that spend thousands of dollars on fireworks every year, that is not my personality. But Lauren wants to get into the hundreds of dollars camp. And I was just kind of looking at her going, is this something we talked about? And I just didn't, I just kind of spaced on. I have no idea.
That's one way to add a spark to the relationship, Connor. You know, I fully endorse that. I think
Cool.
blowing some stuff up can be fun.
Sure. Why not? Let's blow some stuff up today, Will. Here's what prompted the discussion on the Conor O'Gara show. Again, not my original pick for the name, but that is what it's called. Everyone should go listen on Friday mornings to what we're doing with the next round. We go live on YouTube, 9 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Central. I did an Auburn vibe check with Ryan Brown, and I came to the conclusion I think Auburn is straight up having the worst time of anyone in college football in the 2020s. And here's the case. The program has obviously had 5 consecutive losing seasons in the midst of its worst stretch since the Harry Truman administration. You've heard me say that before. You've fired 3 coaches and you've paid all of them 8-figure buyouts. The only winning season in the 2020s resulted in paying what was then the largest buyout in the history of a college football head coach, Gus Malzahn. The job search was botched from the jump with the Kevin Steele mess. You land on Brian Harsin. You staged a failed coup a year later because you don't like him against your 2 biggest rivals in the 2020s, Alabama and Georgia. You're 0-12 against them with some excruciating losses. And those teams have accounted for every single SEC championship in the 2020s, as well as half of the national championships. But it's not just them or even the 0 bowl game victories. It is a 4-26 mark against ranked foes, which is fewer ranked wins in the 2020s than the likes of Arkansas, Vandy, even Kentucky has 9 ranked wins in the 2020s. The only time that people were talking about you nationally was for an embarrassing loss when something like gravedigger happened, or the Jackson Arnold goal line play against Georgia last year, or even allowing 40 straight points to Mississippi State in 2021, or all 3 times that Diego Pavia beat you, whatever the case, it's always about the embarrassing losses. And then there was also the embarrassment of Hugh Freeze's golf scores, but that, whatever, that was blown out of proportion. Auburn's best moment of the 2020s was watching Cadillac Williams lead Auburn to a win against a 5-7 Texas A&M team. And it was a great moment when you step back and realize, man, that's saying a lot. You get what I'm saying here. You also watch your biggest recruit of the 2010s, Bo Nix, leave after 3 years at your program where he had every opportunity, and then he goes off to Oregon and becomes the best possible version of himself. He's a Heisman Trophy finalist. He's a first-round pick. He's a household name in the NFL. And now, and this is maybe a little bit of projection here, but you have the possibility of perhaps your biggest recruit of the 2020s, Cam Coleman, becoming the best version of himself at Texas for a team that thinks it's going to compete for a national championship this year. And mind you, that's after Cam Coleman's last play at Auburn was the fumble in the Iron Bowl. So that's for a program that has treated its home fans to 0 top half offenses in the 2020s. It's a program that's got 2 wins in a battle of top 25 teams, one of which was the COVID opener against Kentucky, a team that would go on to finish 5-6, hardly a real ranked win. Auburn does not have the worst overall record on this list at 33-40 overall and 17-33 in the SEC. There are teams with worse conference records that we're going to get into, and like just in terms of who's been less relevant. Like I get it, there are other teams that are part of this, but I would argue that Auburn right now, as we sit here in 2026, leads the discussion for dud of the decade. And I'm starting here because I want to go through all of these candidates and see if you will have an argument against it, and see if any one of these other teams stacks up to Auburn's horrific 2020s resume. So that's how we're going to do this today.
Yeah, I mean, and you saw what I just lost my mind and started laughing there. What really puts it in perspective is, yeah, your 2 largest rivals have just dominated the SEC championship. I mean, it's like I haven't even thought about that in terms of like, oh, who has it the worst? Like, is it okay? A little bit of like Florida with Miami doing well, Tennessee, Alabama, whatever. No. The fact that they have been able to combine Georgia and Alabama, and those teams are just have been the class of the SEC. And it's like no matter what, they're so inevitable, not just in terms of the SEC, but in terms of that game. Speak about Gravedigger. You speak about, I mean, like the big plays are, the
Bryce Young final, what was it, like 79 seconds, that comeback too as well. Yep. I didn't even mention that. Yeah.
Yep. The Jackson Arnold fumble last year. I do have to, just as in our interview later, declare that I don't think that was the brightest moment at Auburn of the 2020s. I think it was the Bo Nix play against LSU. That play made me feel sadness. But outside of that, I think that play kind of stands alone in terms of happiness they've had. We made 4 guys miss, did all that. So, yeah, and that was the transition that we've talked about between quote-unquote vintage Auburn and modern Auburn. Gus Malzahn, obviously, I think did great things there. I think that he was underrated, and I think that they kind of overestimated their abilities when they said, okay, we need to show you the door kind of unceremoniously after kind of a weird year, at the end there. So, yeah, I think that that's what it is. It is expectation. It is how are your rivals doing? It's how have you been measured? And Auburn, like it or not, has had a dominant national champion season, a Heisman Trophy winner, another national championship appearance that felt like, I mean, we're a play away there from that being the most glorious season in college football history as a fan, where you have the 2 plays that, I believe both of which we've done on overtime on adjustment more. So that being said, like I feel like Auburn fans had this thing that we'll always be back. We'll always find a way. We'll always, maybe we're not Alabama, but our record is close enough against Alabama to where nobody else can even say that. And yeah, looking at kind of the horizon here, and I like the goalish hire. Like I feel like they're in a great. I feel like this is the best. I feel like this is the best they've been in a minute. But if we're talking about this decade, oof.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Who feels worse when head hits pillow? Fall Saturdays. That's really what we're trying to figure out today. So this is the way that we'll kind of frame this, because I've already made the case for Auburn to lead this discussion. It's a discussion that's fluid. You know, we're only 6 years through the 2020s. We still have 4 more years of the 2020s, and we will be able to crown a dubious champion of this, the dud of the decade. I want to treat this like those videos where people do the stop when you see a player better than this guy. Barstool does a lot of that as well. But I think it's good for kind of framing the discussion of like, hey, this is the standard and everybody else, this is what you're trying to, or maybe not trying to live up to in terms of awfulness, in terms of feeling like this is just terrible. And as you mentioned last year, you know, you had a rough year last year. I'm having a rough year in 2025 or 2026. What year is this? 2026. 2025 wasn't your year. 2026 has not been mine so far. I can admit that, even though I watched my alma mater win a national championship, I would still probably make that case. And you get to that feeling of December 31st, you're like, oh, just get me to a new year. You get it. Whoever wins this title will have that feeling of, oh, just get me to a new decade. I'm so glad that this one is over.
Yeah, been there before. And
Yeah.
again, hopefully brighter futures ahead.
So I will go through these teams, and then I'll ask the same question at the end of them of, Will, who's had a worse time in the 2020s, Auburn or this team that I'm mentioning? Okay.
Easy.
Let's start with the one that Ryan brought up that was top of mind for me as well, if I could speak today. Nebraska, obviously. And by the way, Ryan brought that up as someone who actually likes Matt Rule. There's an obvious case for this. It's the winless record against AP top 25 teams. It's not just a 2020s thing, but it's currently at 30 in a row, dating back to 2016. You fired your savior, Scott Frost, because he could not win a one-score game to save his life. That's the worst kind of loss for a fan base to suffer. And your savior then insisted that it was the wrong job for him, even though he self-destructed in every possible way. You've also watched your biggest recruit of the decade up and leave for Oregon. TBD on the Dylan Raiola experiments in Eugene and how that goes. But unlike Auburn, who watched Bo Nix up and leave for Oregon, you haven't had a winning conference season in the 2020s. You know, you only fired one coach, but 2 ADs willingly left, including Trev Alberts, aka an all-American offensive lineman who was part of those vintage 90s Tom Osborne teams who left for Texas A&M. You've tried to distract people with things like a massive stadium renovation and those new uniforms. It's still a program that's 29-41 in the 2020s. But you are at least coming off consecutive winning seasons that included a bowl victory for the first time in a decade. The sellout streak is alive, because when you can just have rich people scoop up unsold tickets and write them off as charity donations, that's just what you do. You heard that from many people, not just me. And you haven't had to watch your rivals become juggernauts in the way that Auburn has. So, Will, who has had a worse time in the 2020s, Nebraska or Auburn?
So this was the first name that came up to me whenever you kind of like explained this to me. And I understand the rules of this, but I do want to have one little caveat here. Auburn, during this period of time, right? Like, they were pretty good at basketball. They had some things to be happy about. I know this is about football, but the thing about Nebraska is, yeah, they have a recent basketball success. If you're in Nebraska, man, they have just proven over and over again that they care so freaking much about just football. I mean, like, the way that they
Volleyball.
I was actually about to go there. They have turned into a volleyball school. That's how sad their football team is. I was literally about to go there, where they're selling out their football stadium for volleyball. So they are just a mass of people that so badly wants to believe in something, right? And that's not speaking to the quality of their volleyball team. I actually follow their volleyball team, and I'm really impressed by what they've done. But that being said, when you have so many legacies, Raiola, talking about Frost, talking about like Trev Alberts or whatever, it's like, hey, you already brought in the legacy guys that were going to right the ship the way that Miami has tried to do it. It just didn't work for you. So you got to go in a completely different direction. And so, yeah, I think that's what's so fascinating, that they have shown, hey, this is our NIL approach. This is our new practice facility. This is our business center we're going to give to the athletes. Like, you truly are within striking distance. There is no one in the Big Ten outside of maybe like an Ohio State, that you can look at and be like, this team can really outspend us if we really get our ducks in a row, if we really are real about ourselves and our expectations, the way they've sold out that stadium. So, yeah, I think they're right there neck and neck with Auburn. And that's why I do a little bit of a tiebreaker there where I go, at least Auburn's at basketball. Again, I'm sure that people care about volleyball, but if you're just talking around in the office, that's not going to save you.
Nebraska's coming off its best basketball season ever, though. Like
No,
that's
I know. But it's been 1 year. That's the thing. Auburn had the whole Bruce Pearl on you to be happy about.
Yeah, I do want to just stick to football, and I don't think that should like make or break the discussion, because I think this is about what fall looks like. And if you've experienced fall in those places, you know that there's not like turning the page does not just automatically happen. Now, maybe you can make the case for Auburn. That's been a different discussion as of late, and you've had that to look forward to.
You know what? No, here's why I'm going to
fashion.
take Nebraska. Nebraska is used to being the big dog historically. Auburn, I love the town of Auburn. I love the Plains. I love their identity as kind of the plucky underdog. I think they're so easy to root for. I think that like the family, all of their branding goes with, you're going to come here, we're going to welcome you, we're going to accept you, have a good time. Nebraska's branding is like, we are the black shirts, we are going to beat the teeth out of you. This is original joyless murder ball. And so the fact that they're both at about the same level of success speaks that Nebraska is more sad, because they're used to just kicking people's teeth in, and they just can't do that now, not even close.
Here's where I'll concede this argument, and where I'll agree with you. If I'm predicting who will be the number one leader in this discussion by the time the decade concludes, my pick would be Nebraska. It would not be Auburn. I think for my projection of Alex Golesh versus my projection of Matt Rule, that's where that gets factored in. But if I'm just looking at how this has started so far and knowing the pain, the different levels of pain, because there was the ramp up that Nebraska had in the 2010s. Like I saw it firsthand there, with all of a sudden realizing like, you're a borderline top 25 team with Bo Pelini. And then you had this precipitous fall under the botched Mike Riley hiring that led into Frost and all that other stuff. But you are now at a place where you feel like, oh, yes, we missed our window, but we at least have this sense of optimism that Matt Rule is not going to let us bottom out in the way that others potentially would. So that's the only thing that I would really push back on for there. But they're, in my opinion, like everybody else in the discussion, they're chasing those two. Like and maybe you'll disagree with that, but I think those are the two clear leaders you have to bring up when you start this.
And look at their contracts too. I mean, I know we've talked about the contract there for Rule, but it's the mystery box, right? It's Golesh might not be Matt Rule. Their contracts are so different; they're not locked in long term. So either with Golesh, he can beat top 25 teams, which in the SEC you'll know pretty quickly, right? Like we usually know about guys. But then also the odds of someone getting to that place, at a place like Auburn, where you can just feast on bottom feeders, is not really possible. So yeah, I'm gonna lock in my pick. Nebraska is farther in hell because they're stuck with that Rule.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's end this discussion then. That's pod. That'll do it. No. All right. Let's dig into some other teams here. And again, there is a difference in tier. I think we're getting into now the tier 2 already. Michigan State. When I talked at Lauren about this, I know what I said. Michigan State was one of her 2 picks for this. And we'll get to the other one in a second. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like Michigan State needed to be part of this discussion, and not just because they're on their 3rd AD in 2 years. I mean, that is wild. Even Tom Izzo was like, seriously, this is what we're doing, guys?
Dude, his quote the other day was grim.
It's pretty over it. It doesn't sound like a guy that's going to be coaching for several more years, if I had to guess. We can't.
That was almost like a "don't call me to save you from this mess" type of quote, because we've seen some coaches come back and do that. He's like, "I will be in Boca Raton, dog."
Yeah, Boca Raton. People always say Boca Raton. Boca Raton. Boca Raton. Okay. Always bothers me. Anyway, Mel Tucker saga. It happened. Like you had the mega deal, the 10-year mega deal, when everybody's doing it in 2021, and he repaid you by having inappropriate conduct with a domestic violence advocate and getting fired with cause. So then you make the smart hire of getting Jonathan Smith, a guy that was very well respected, arguably the best hire of the post 2017 cycle when he went to Oregon State. And then he essentially follows the Chad Morris Arkansas timeline of 2 years and out. Some might not want to include Michigan State here because there's optimism about Pat Fitzgerald, even though by the time he coaches this fall, it'll be roughly like I think we're at like 1,700 days since Pat Fitzgerald has won a game against a power conference team on American soil. Not that I'm keeping track, but I would add to this. They watched Michigan win a national title, you know, and that's a big part of this, especially for the program that was called Little Bro. Shout out Mike Hart. That happened in a year in which your team was in disarray and you lost 49-0. And then you lost the fight in the tunnel afterwards to make matters worse. That was ugly. 31-37 overall, Michigan State is in the 2020s. They're 18-34 in Big Ten play in that stretch, 5 losing seasons. And that's for a 2020s decade that started with Mark D'Antonio being locked in as your head coach, only for him to retire weeks after getting a $4.3 million longevity bonus. People forget about that. The only case I can make it against it is this. 2021 Kenneth Walker. It was fun. It was fun. He was good. That team was nasty because he was nasty. They won 11 games. They finished 9th in the AP poll. They had the comeback win against a playoff-bound Michigan team that year. Their high is arguably higher than anybody on this list. So, Will, who has had the worst time in the 2020s? Michigan State, Auburn, or Nebraska?
I think we're at a tier break here. I think, and again, I know I get the goal of the exercise, but I'm not even exactly positive they're a football school. I think that their goals are to be 11-2, right? And they did that once, and I don't know if there's going to be anybody else on this list that was able to get to the highs that they have. But again, it's all about expectations, and I think that it sucks to watch Michigan win for sure. But I don't think that the period that we're in right now is very disappointing for them. But I don't think that they're in hell in the way that the folks in Lincoln or Auburn are.
Yeah, they did have great, great moments in the 2010s. Can't forget about that. And that perhaps set the stage for whoever Mark D'Antonio's successor was. But he had some rough final years. And I do think that that's context that probably changed what we thought Michigan State's ceiling was. I mean, going to the Rose Bowl, going to the college football playoff, like these are things that they did, and felt like were real and sustainable, and just have not been able to sustain any of it in the NIL era at all. But a team that has probably been like, yeah, this sucks. Let's watch anything else besides football.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like, I had to double check the D'Antonio thing because that was just after the turn of the decade. So I think that does count
Yep.
in their misery. Like
Yep.
he stepped down in February of 2020. And it's really underrated how messy their situation has been, because that situation was messy. The Mel Tucker situation has been messy. But again, it just doesn't feel quite as hopeless. They have, oh man, what's his name? The donor that owns the basketball team. Is it Dan Gilbert? They have a couple of very, very
Ishbia?
Ishbia. They have Ishbia, and maybe also they have a couple of very, very rich guys that are there. So it doesn't feel like that level of hopelessness. They're still in the Big Ten. It just feels like they don't really care. Like if they really said, hey, we're done losing, feels like they could pull a couple of levers that they haven't quite engaged yet, which like Nebraska has not done.
Yeah, and it is kind of a reminder of you fire head coaches sooner than what probably the casual fan might realize, in hopes that you just change around the vibes. And Michigan State very much needed to change around the vibes. It did not work with the Aiden Childs, Jonathan Smith thing, and it's just been really rough and kind of surprisingly rough for them in the 2020s after a really solid decade, or at least solid first half of the decade for Michigan State in the 2010s. Okay, Oregon State. Yeah, speaking of Jonathan Smith, you have to include a program that had its conference crumble and then watch literally everyone else in that conference besides Washington State find a new happy home. That part's tough because you're being told how bad you are. This is Michael Scott thinking he's getting invited to Ryan's cool party in New York to launch Dunder Mifflin Infinity, only to realize midway through the drive that he's only got a chat room invite. Of course, Michael Gary Scott does not take L, so eventually he had to make his way to New York with Dwight for some of that New York sushi. Oregon State doesn't take L's, okay? It just started the Pac-12 up again and had its own fun, of course. It's been pretty costly, though. It has been. You watch Jonathan Smith leave his alma mater in good standing because of those dynamics, and you can't convince me otherwise. You did the internal promotion of Trent Bray, and then that very quickly flamed out. Oregon, meanwhile, is living its best life in the Big Ten. What was once kind of a fun back and forth even like later days of the Pac-12, it was kind of like not a given who was going to win that rivalry. Like that's turned into a clear superiority factor that Oregon has over Oregon, even though you could argue they've had that for a good chunk of the 21st century. And this could be Oregon's breakthrough year. You could have to watch that. TBD. Again, that's projecting. But I don't think it can be in the lead for this reason. From 2021 to 2023, aka the last 3 years of the previous version of the Pac-12, Oregon State had 3 winning seasons with 2 wins against Oregon during that time. It was their best 3-year stretch in 15 years. They were ranked in the final playoff poll twice. A 34 and 36 mark over a 6-year stretch in some places is dreadful. Like if that happened at Ohio State, we'd be like, oh my God, what in the world has happened in that program? But Corvallis is not Columbus. Okay. It's just not. I will say, if we're doing this at the end of the decade, keep an eye on Oregon State. They could be a winner. They could be set up well. They could be set up well in the new version of the Pac-12. We'll see how it works out with Jamarcus Shepard. But it's part of this discussion. And in my opinion, it's just not leading because of that 3-year stretch. So, Will, who has had the worst time in the 2020s? Auburn, Nebraska, or Oregon State?
So I have a lot of points to make here about losing your conference and all that, but I think that those points would be better served for Washington State,
Which I'll get
because
to in a second here.
right. And so the tiebreaker is these winning seasons. And so ultimately, okay, again, I'll get to it. But when you bump up against that, can we have fun on a Saturday? Can we watch some wins? You're ultimately kind of a G5 team. Vibes are not, I mean, you see the ceiling, but if you can win and go to the games and, kiss your girl on the touchdowns, how bad could it really be?
Yeah, Lauren's boss grew up in Corvallis rooting for Oregon State. And if I told him that Oregon State would be leading this discussion, he'd say, no, 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 no. You've got that all wrong. Relative to expectations. Very important with something like that. Okay. You teased it. Washington State, of course. You got to include both of them. You have to. The 2 teams that were left out, musical chairs, didn't work out for them. Everyone else in the Pac-12 scooped up. Even Cal had a suitor from the ACC. And yet these poor folks in Pullman, Washington are like, anybody? No takers? We got nothing. Let's also remember what happened 9 days into the 2020s decade. Your savior, Mike Leach, left you for Mississippi State. The guy that brought you joy throughout the 2010s bolted for a lower tier power conference job. And then in 2021, his successor, Nick Rolovich, he gets fired because he refuses to get the COVID vaccine. His successor, Jake Dicker, our friend, comes along, actually does well in 3+ seasons there, but leaves for another lower tier power conference job at Wake Forest, which felt very much like a direct byproduct of the Pac-12 exit. I realized he was there for a year in which they were independent, but you get what I'm saying. And then, cool, you got your guy, Jimmy Rogers, gets you to a bowl game, only for him to leave for Iowa State after just a year on the job. To recap, Washington State has had 4 coaches in the 2020s. 3 left for the likes of Mississippi State, Wake Forest, and Iowa State. And 1 didn't want to get a vaccine. So I guess you're on your 5th coach of the 2020s. That's what we're talking about here. That's nuts. All right, we're only in 2026. I don't know if you've been keeping track at home. We're only on 2026. And now Kirby Moore is probably going to stay there for a long time, maybe. I don't know. I like Kirby Moore, but first-time head coach. We'll see how it works out. You've also watched Washington play in a national championship in 2023. Did get 2 wins in the Apple Cup, which thankfully that's continuing at least for another few years. The only argument against Washington State to be leading this discussion is they've actually been all right. They've actually been okay. Since the 1-3 COVID season, between 5 and 8 wins, it's not like truly bottoming out. 35 and 33 overall. So record above 500 for a program without a lot of historical success. Okay. I kind of think they're in a good spot with the new structure of the Pac-12 because of the head start that they're going to have among, all those Mountain West transplants. They've got a better start with resources than one would probably think. So, Will, who has had a worse time in the 2020s? Auburn, Nebraska, or Washington State?
This one I have decided is up in the tier with the other 2. I think this is a striking distance. And let me tell you why. Give me those destinations again that their coaches left for.
Mississippi State, Wake Forest, Iowa State, and unvaccinated It's
The
those
Daily
one.
Mail. And so that being said, right, that you take out the vaccination word is the most horrifying trend in the world you could possibly see. Okay, lose a guy to SEC. Who would bug us? Okay, lose a guy to the ACC. It's a little bit embarrassing, but by coastal, they're kind of at our level a bit. Oh, this guy's going to Iowa State, not the Big Ten one. No, the other one. Uh-oh.
Well, it's
Now
like
we're
Troy. It's like Troy. That's what it reminds me of. And you're
yeah.
basically a group of 5 team at that point. Like that's what you're accepting is with all those coaches. They are telling you that's how far behind you are.
Yes. And now I'm going to speak on the sadness of losing the Pac-12, right? Having, Bill Walton pass away, right after the last official Pac-12 event, right? Like seeing the video, the mascots all hugging for the last time, right? Like the guy in the Wazoo, like with the Wazoo flag that's been on game day forever, and him getting interviewed about you've devoted so much of your life to this for free, for at cost to you, and what is it giving you back? Sorrow, right? And so, like I said, I think that with Oregon State, it's a little bit different because they've been scrappy. They've been able to kind of, push back and forth, punch back. And I think that the additions of some of these other teams, the Pac-12, do soften this blow. I think that when they were truly 2 teams without a country, it was even sadder. But again, to see your rival appear in a national title, get closer, I feel, than Oregon has, right? To see, okay, this is just how far away we are. It's across the state, and there's only room for one. It's like the door in the Titanic. It's like only one of us can get out of this ship, but it's so clearly going to be Washington. And what they've been able to do in the Big Ten and everything. Like it's one thing to lose Kalen DeBoer to a once in a generation Alabama job. It's another thing to again lose your guy to. Golly, man. I mean, that's just so rough. And so, yeah, I mean, if you're truly locked in, that's the thing. I don't know what the people of Pullman, Washington have going on a given week. I don't know how much they care, but that's really the only edge I can give Nebraska is that I know there's really nothing else to do in the middle of Nebraska. No, just like no disrespect to them, but they would tell you that, right? At least they could say, I don't care about this anymore. Like at least they could say, this isn't going to bring me joy. I'm done. Whereas the people of Lincoln are trapped. But yeah, I mean, there's just nothing good coming out of Pullman lately. It's a rough scene.
That's so tough to hear that from power conferences say, no, we don't want you. From your own head coaches, your highest paid employees at the university who have said, we don't want you. And yeah, I'm sure like if you give them truth serum, they would say, look, I enjoyed my time there, but I also see the writing on the wall and I see the way that college football is trending. And you can't be in a place like this where all of a sudden you're looking up going, am I in a power conference job? No, I'm not. And you were relegated. You were relegated. That is the closest thing that we have seen in college football to relegation. And that having that play out and that dynamic and just being the ultimate like the ultimate face of the side effects, the ripple effect of realignment. Like that sucks. That's a brutal pill to have to swallow. So Washington State and Oregon State, I think are firm, like they can't go away in this discussion in the 2020s. We can't lose sight of that and what it means to go from being in that place and feeling like, oh, in a given year, like we can compete at a top 25 level if we hit it right. And then all of a sudden to being like, oh boy, maybe eventually like we can work our way up to perhaps getting the group of 5 bid. And even that might be a little bit ambitious, but you've moved down a status in college football.
And I'll say too, the tragic death of Mike Leach as well. Like you can't even look fondly on the Gardner Minshew years and say, look what it used to be, because it brings the sadness associated with that. So yeah, it's like everything that they could put their hat on, I think is just crumbling.
All right. So speaking of that, well, Mississippi State is our next team up here. And not to make light of this, but having your head coach die during a 9-win season is unheard of. I mean, it just doesn't happen. I mean, it just does not happen. You finally made this big splash at the start of the 2020s by getting Mike Leach. You go to his place in Key West, you give him this $5 million contract, and you got 3 years out of it. That's it. Not because he flamed out, because he died. Because we always want someone to blame. A ref, player, coach, resources in this day and age. You can't really be mad at a death that very drastically changes the trajectory of your program. And I haven't done a good enough job of talking about this, but Well, I think Leach would have thrived in the portal era. I really do. Like we didn't get to see that. We didn't get to see that really take shape with the way that rosters were constructed back in 2022. This is someone who recruited to a very specific system that could know very quickly if that guy was good to play in it or not play in it. And he often would bring in, he'd often would have an experienced quarterback run it, or at least that's when we would see it run well. He could pluck a veteran quarterback like a Gardner Minshew, who, was going to be maybe third string quarterback at Alabama and decides, I'm just going to lead the nation in passing in Washington State. He could have plug and play wideouts that he'd be able to get and go to all these different group of 5 places. And I bet he'd be really good with that. That he wouldn't waste any words with those 24-hour recruitments. I think Leach would have really done well with portal evaluating. And it's a chapter that we just didn't get to see. And if you're a Mississippi State fan, that frustrates you knowing that, man, you felt like you actually were building towards something really good. And even if you were due for kind of a setback next year, like you could have been set up really well in the 2020s. And that's just not been the case because of how it's played out since then with 5-7, 2-10, 5-8, one and done for Zach Arnett. Jeff Lebby is now facing pressure in year 3. The thing that I think is worth repeating here once again, in the post-Leach era at Mississippi State, they do not have a home SEC win. 3 seasons, 0 home SEC wins. You beat Arizona State last year and did so in incredibly dramatic fashion for what was easily the best moment of the post-Leach era. That's all well and good. You also watch your team squander a golden opportunity against Texas. And then there's the Ole Miss part of this. On one hand, you probably had a good chuckle watching all the lane drama play out. You're like, see, you're going to go back to being totally irrelevant. Enjoy this. And then on the other hand, they followed that by, having their best season of the post-integration era, and we're 20 seconds away from playing for a national championship. Your lone win against them in the 2020s was the last game that Leach coached in 2022. The argument against Mississippi State, been to a bowl game 4 times, won 2 of them, did have that ugly melee after the Armed Forces Bowl in 2020. People forget that. It's a 32-42 mark overall in the 2020s, but 8 wins against ranked foes. That included starting the decade by breaking the SEC single game passing record against the defending champs. Will, I think you remember that one well. It also included the aforementioned 40 consecutive points after falling behind 28-3 against number 16 Auburn, beginning of the end of the Brian Harsin era. So, Will, who is having a worse time in the 2020s? Auburn, Nebraska, or Mississippi State?
Golly, man, that's a compelling case as well. Okay, so really quick, I do think the Leach part of this is so interesting because again, from the Washington State side, you could say, hey, it really did take a perfect pitch to make him leave Pullman, right? Like to your point about going to Key West and all the stories that have been told there. And from Mississippi State's part, they could say, wow, we were in a position to make this perfect pitch. So both schools can kind of walk away from that in a positive way, right? But to your point, the fallout that has become there where you have such a clear identity, you have finally gotten your roster retooled. I think the transfer portal part of this is so fascinating, Connor. It's such a great point because how many guys that were, 4 and even 5 stars that were just languishing on a bench somewhere would have gone, hey, worst case scenario, I'm going to have my little version of Blue Mountain State out here in Stark Vegas and go play this 5-wide system where I'm going to just catch, a ton of passes and fall down, or I'm going to have the ability to run screen passes, or I'm going to have really good tape. I'll be able to tell my kids and grandkids one day, I used to be able to do X, Y, and Z, look at my highlights. And they're going to go, why didn't you get drafted? And you go, I was 5'7". And so like all of that sounds awesome, right? Like in the transfer portal era, that there would be this enclave that you could just go play for this pirate in Mississippi. It would just be about ball and partying and having fun. And a guy who famously, backed up his players and was like, hey, if you got a fight in you, we'll harness that. And I think that, trying to kind of pay respect to him with the hire that was made after that didn't exactly work out in Arnett, who is obviously back in town. I think you just got to treat it sensitively, with kind of kid gloves when you're at a place like Mississippi State and you do feel like, you had it figured out for the next however many years. And at least you had a runway to pick who that was going to be straight from the man, himself. So yeah, I'm with you. I think they're kind of at the top of the second tier. I wouldn't quite put them in the top 3 because Mississippi State has watched some bad football football. You know what I'm saying? Like they've watched some bad football over their tenure as friends or as fans. I think the Ole Miss part of it's new, but I think that ultimately, you know, just being directionless and getting cooked by your Alabamas and your other teams isn't a new thing for them. But I will say that Texas game was really something special.
I also remembered thinking I was there at the 2022 ReliaQuest Bowl, the first game without Leach, and they beat Illinois. It's a comeback win, really emotional. If you saw the scene afterwards, it was pretty unique, seeing the reaction from those players, how much it meant to them. You could say bowl games don't mean anything anymore in the playoff era. That meant something to Mississippi State. And, I remember writing, this is the beginning of the new era. This is how they're going to have to win games. It's going to be more low scoring, and they're going to get into some rock fights. Like if they're going to be relevant and if they're going to keep their head above water post Leach, this is kind of what it's going to have to look like. And it just has not played out in the way that they could have anticipated. And it's such a difficult thing to project because nobody knows how to respond to that. But it has truly defined the 2020s for Mississippi State. And it's not to say that's an excuse. And it's not to say it's an excuse for some of the poor decisions that Jeff Lebby made down the stretch to be able to blow some of those games last year. Like they have to get better in some of those spots. You can't just be like, well, our coach died 3 years ago, so this is why we couldn't close out the fourth quarter against Texas. I'm not saying that. But it has defined it in a way that I didn't really think it would. And it looms. It definitely looms. Okay, Wisconsin. Knew they were going to be brought up here. From 2005 to 2019, which is really when I kind of came to know and respect Wisconsin. I went to Camp Randall probably 4 times during that stretch, I think. They had a 15-year stretch in which they finished unranked 3 times. That's it. They were able to overcome Brett Bielema leaving for Arkansas. They entered the 2020s as one of the most set it and forget it programs in the sport. And if you recall, that was with prize quarterback recruit Graham Mertz, set to be the new face of the program. Yeah, about that. Graham Mertz's most noteworthy accomplishment, I shouldn't say accomplishment, his most noteworthy moment at Wisconsin was him dropping and shattering the Mayo Bowl trophy. Remember that? Go look that one up, kids. If that doesn't perfectly describe Wisconsin in the 2020s, I don't know what does. That's it right there. They had Paul Chryst fall out of favor. Camp Randall emptied out. They got a discount on his buyout. And even though fans were upset that Jim Leonard didn't get the full-time job, they very quickly were like, wait a minute, we got Luke Fickell? That's awesome. That's great. And then it's not been great. It's been really, really rough. Wisconsin has yet to have a ranked finish in the 2020s. A stunning thing to say as we are 6 years through this decade. On top of that, they've got a coach that's on arguably the hottest seat in America with an AD who just got bounced. And if they have to pay him upwards of $20 million to go away, that would suck too. They have no footing or identity in this new look Big Ten, which is thriving, but not at all because of Wisconsin, which is so weird. Because if you had told anyone in the 2010s, hey, the Big Ten is going to have this renaissance in the 2020s with 3 different teams winning a national title, plenty of people would have assumed that Wisconsin was either one of those teams or at least was chomping at the bit and maybe getting to a Big Ten championship and pushing those teams. And instead, at least 6 losses in all 3 of those seasons in which they've watched a different team win a national championship from the Big Ten. On top of that, just 3 wins against ranked foes. That's even fewer than Auburn. Have had quarterbacks just dropping like flies. And last season, 9 points per conference game. I mean, you want to talk about not having a good time. That is not having a good time. The argument against Wisconsin is this: 3 bowl wins in the 2020s, 2 of which had trophies that were not shattered. No massive scandal. You've only had to fire 1 coach, maybe 2 very soon. And while you've had to watch fellow Big Ten teams win a national title, at least it's not like some Big Ten West rival.
You've never had one, so what could you expect?
No, Minnesota. Minnesota is very much a rival.
No. I'm saying they've never had a title. Wisconsin has never won a title, so they can't be like, oh no, more teams have won titles without us.
Oh, yeah, true, true. I get what you're saying. Yeah. So you've at least not have had that element come up in the way that like an Auburn or Michigan State has. 36 and 34 record overall in the 2020s, 23 and 28 in Big Ten play. I actually thought those numbers would be worse. But relative to expectations, knowing the 15-year stretch that Wisconsin entered the 2020s on, that's pretty horrendous. So, Will, who is having a worse time in the 2020s? Auburn, Nebraska, or Wisconsin?
Wisconsin situation is not that bad, and I'm here to tell you, people of Camp Randall, you can hire me right now and I'll fix it. What you need is an assertiveness coach. You need the version of what Plankton was to SpongeBob when he taught him how to be assertive. And I'm here to tell you, I'm going to lend you my services. I'm going to go in that discussion meeting in the Culvers that's had every year, and I'm going to say, listen here, bleep face, I'm done. All right, we know what the buyout is. We know what the situation is. Those boys should never let Jim Leonard get out of the building. What I'm going to do is bring in Jim Leonard, make him the DC, and say, I'm going to put in a smarter coach than you with the thought that if you can't turn it around, we're going to look right there at that guy. And I think that they just need to be more assertive. I think they just have been too chill. It's like I said, that they've fallen for the tall guy with a terrible credit score, and their mom's going, what's the plan here? And that could be me. I could be their mom. I could sit down in the in the meeting room and say, what's your 5-year plan? Hey, what are we doing? We got a degree we're working on. We got some career opportunities. What is your plan here at Camp Randall? Because you're wasting my program's time. I think this is pretty easily fixable, and they need to hurry before Jim Leonard gets a better opportunity.
Jason Eck. But yeah, Jason Eck is going to be the guy.
Either or.
The funny thing is like we make the joke about the Culver's meeting that they have to be able to award their satisfactory coaches with automatic 1-year extensions. We make those jokes, even though the two things that they did in the 2020s that were most noteworthy were pretty aggressive moves. Firing Paul Chryst at that time, a lot of people were like, how could you fire this guy? Like, what do you mean? And it's kind of a big reason why I say optics matter, because the optics were so bad. And those that were just looking at his record and the stability, they were not realizing that the fan base had totally lost trust in him. He wasn't going to be able to recruit and sell boosters in the NIL era. And I think that there is a feeling, or at least there was a feeling when Luke Fickell was hired, of like, oh my God, did Wisconsin just get the best hire of the cycle? They ended up with Luke Fickell. That's pretty amazing, all things considered. And it just has not worked out. So they've tried aggressive, they tried not aggressive, and it's been tough. And it's been really, really tough. And so, yeah, that's why everybody's pointing at Jason Eck going like, that's probably the solution. If Luke Fickell is again, at least just, sitting there at 5-7 or 6-6, like that's probably the direction they'll go. But I never thought in a million years that they would be part of this discussion. They're 100% part of it.
Our guy Tony Soprano can also fix it. There's a couple of obvious options to be, and they're just not in one of them.
All right, P. All right. Florida. Florida. Let's start with the obvious here. 2 coach firings with 8-figure buyouts at the end of year 4. Still trying to get a coach to year 5 for the first time in the post-Urban era. You know this. Still 0 playoff appearances. The best opportunity for a playoff berth was blown because of a thrown shoe. You know this. Embarrassment has defined Florida in the 2020s. The thrown shoe, the Dan Mullen tirades, the time Samford put up half 100 in the swamp, the time USF came into the swamp and won. Florida has had 4 losing seasons in the 2020s. And if you don't think that Florida deserves to be a part of this discussion, you need to hear me say the stat. I'm going to start it over because there are people going, oh, what are you talking about? They've had this moment. They've had this moment. No. Florida in the 2020s has had 4 losing seasons, which is a lot when you remember that in the 40 seasons prior, Florida had 2 losing seasons. Okay? They had more national championships in that stretch than losing seasons. That's why they're part of this. 2 other key elements. Georgia. Not sure if you heard. It's in the lead for the team of the decade discussion after ending the 1980 jokes, which in most part came from Florida fans who were making them, and repeating by doing the thing that Florida did not do when it won those 3 national titles, go undefeated. Georgia did that. Florida hasn't done that. So you've seen that change. And that's tough. You could argue that the team having the worst time is the rival of the team having the best time, if we just want to simplify this whole thing. Okay. But the dud of the decade of the 2020s, which was Tennessee, Decade of Dysfunction. Shout out Mark Nagy for that book. They finally won in the swamp for the first time in 2 decades. Tennessee has now won 3 of 4 against Florida, which has only happened one other time since those two teams started playing each other in 1990, which just so happened to be the first year of Spurrier. The prized Florida recruit of the 2020s, DJ Lagway, bounced after year 2. We never really got to see him fully live up to that 5-star hype that he came in with. Don't know that he's about to become a Heisman finalist at Baylor like Bo Nix at Oregon, but who knows? The argument against Florida, and the only reason I didn't lead with them in this discussion, 4 bowl berths and an SEC championship trip in the 2020s. You've at least had some of those good moments sprinkled in there. Billy Napier's 2022 debut, the win against Utah, where everybody freaked out over 3 plays that Anthony Richardson made and told themselves that he was the next Cam Newton. I was there last year for the Texas game. That was a great moment. Beating Georgia during the COVID season, that was kind of a breakthrough moment for Florida. Got them to the SEC championship that year. First time, beating like that version of Kirby. That was a big deal. The LSU and Ole Miss wins in consecutive weeks in 2024. Those were big deals. Florida is in the midst of a historically bad stretch, and yet it has 6 wins against ranked foes, which not good, but 4 wins against top 10 teams, which is kind of a reminder of like, yeah, they can just kind of come up out of nowhere and have one of those moments and convince you that they're more relevant than they are. So, Will, who is having a worse time in the 2020s? Auburn, Nebraska, or Florida?
It's actually so funny that this is the point where I get to address this, because I've joked about this. There's not been a team that I've been more consistently correct against the median average than Florida. I think since I got on this podcast, pretty much every single thing I've said about Florida has ended up being right.
Since you got on the podcast, Kyle Trask was better than you gave him credit for, but we don't need to get into that. That's fine.
Well,
as a college quarterback, I don't care about the NFL. I don't care about the NFL. He did not throw that shoe.
I know, I understand, but like I could see the deeper meaning of Mullen's not stacking these recruits. Yeah, Florida made the SEC championship game in this weird, COVID year, but they never led. Okay, you could see how this bowl game has gone and how that means guys are like, off the boat, and like what that's turned into, and how several other teams have followed suit there, including Florida State. I think that it's funny that I'm viewing this right now, because despite me running uphill against water current for 6 years about Florida and being empirically absolutely correct, this is the first time I am legitimately feeling good about Florida. I like John Summerall. I've been saying this consistently. And so it's such a bummer to me that now I'm sitting here. If we had this conversation a year ago, I would have been like, I still think this guy Billy's a fraud, because I said that after the LSU and the Ole Miss wins and nobody wanted to hear it. But that being said, I do feel like they've hired the type of coach that can actually bring the hard-nosed mentality that they thought they had, or that they lacked with Dan Mullen, at least. I don't know. Again, Billy is one of these salesman type guys. But that being said, it's so wild what they were unable to get out of their talent. It's so wild when you've seen these guys that go to the NFL, or you see what's on their roster right now. And so that being said, I said this from the beginning of the decade. I think that the expectations at the University of Florida are disjointed with what reality has been. I see that we have gotten the stadium renovation. I see that we added all these guys on staff with Billy. But Florida is a university that truly is an everything school. And when you are that, you don't really have the ability to pool your massive amount of resources into one place like a Nebraska and go outspend in Alabama, go outspend in Ohio State. And so I think that they have now been playing catch up after the disaster with their NIL collectives and all that different stuff. So like, I think they just didn't understand where they were for 6 years, but I think now they do. That's the thing, is that like they've had a horrible time, but they've fully done it to themselves. I think that if you looked objectively at the coaches they've hired the guys on the rosters, Graham Mertz, whatever it would be, and gone, how could you think this team could win 9 or 10 games if you really empirically looked at them? And so it would be hard for me to say that in 4 years they'd be back in this spot, because I think they've finally looked in the mirror after striking out for Lane Kiffin and gone, this is the type of coach that can save us.
That was really nice and really mean at the same time.
Hey, that's what we're here for. It's gentle parenting, or I guess honesty.
They are spending money now, and if you don't believe that, look at how expensive the stadium renovation is. I mean,
that matters. And guess what? Yeah. They just started that, hiring a couple extra guys in renovating stuff. The practice facilities newer. We've started to see things happen in a row now that I can start to get behind.
It's going to be part of this discussion if they are still left out of the playoff, because that's the standard that Florida is held to. That's the standard that they're held to nationally. Because I think, fair or not, when you've won multiple national championships in the 21st century, people come back to that. They come back to that, whether it's the roster dictates it or not. And I'm not saying that that's ultimately what is fair in a given year for Florida. It's certainly not going to be fair for this year, but they have had a frustrating time of it in the 2020s because even when they were at their best, the face of the program was losing his mind. And that's just such a unique thing to have to wrestle with as a fan that you're like, wait a minute, can we actually enjoy this? Is this actually a good thing that's happening to us? Because we see the flaws. We see that this defense isn't particularly good. And we know that this offense is going to lose a lot of its pieces next year. Next year could be kind of rough if we don't hit it right. And if Emory Jones doesn't turn out to be the guy that we think he is. But yeah, I mean, Florida has had a really, really tough sell nationally that they are still relevant year in, year out. And I think that's the place that they would like to be able to get back to with John Summerall. TBD on that. TBD on
Wait,
that.
so you're saying they have playoff expectations year one under Summerall?
No, that's what I'm saying they don't have. I'm saying they
Got
do
it.
not have playoff
I'm just making
expectations
sure
year
because
one.
that's
No.
my point. I think they actually need to have a scheduled building year. Not a year where they lose hope like 2024 and then get it back. I think playoff expectations are fair in year 2 under John Summerall. But again, if you've never made the playoff, how can I expect you to be in the playoff? That's what I've always said is that they need to do something different, and now they're doing that. So I feel great about them, to be honest.
Number 1 in the country in percentage of returning defensive production. We'll see if it matters this year. Stanford. Fun fact, Will. Or you're going to get your mind blown with some of the Stanford stuff, I promise you. Stanford has not reached 5 wins once in the 2020s.
That's nuts. Okay.
Other fun fact, Stanford is now on its 4th coach of the 2020s, Tavita Pritchard. Last fun fact, Stanford now plays in a conference named after the other ocean, not the one that it's 20 miles away from. Speaking of the number 20, Stanford in the 2020s, 20 total wins, 20-46 overall, 14-35 in conference play in whatever conference they've been in, Pac-12, ACC, of course. Even though I think a lot of people would have said at the start of the decade, they had a top 10 coach in the sport in David Shaw. 0 appearances in the AP Top 25. Worst record overall among power conference teams in the 2020s. Auburn, that's even worse than you. On top of that, Stanford had the number 56 scoring offense during the COVID season, but since then, here are the FBS ranks in scoring offense. 113, 109, 112, 106, 122. But hey, new coaching staff just came on board. Maybe they're going to have an influx of talent or something like that, right? Fresh start, bring in a bunch of new guys. Let's see how this works. Oh boy. 6 transfers. You can count them almost all on one hand. If you're Antonio Afonseca, you can count them all on one hand. 1/3 of which are from Harvard and Yale. Yeah. 2 of your 6 transfers, Harvard and Yale. You can't even sell yourself on Andrew Luck being some game-changing general manager when basically you're just still going to be Stanford, right? That seems like really just a marketing thing at this point. Steve Sarkisian could never imagine the academic restrictions for transfers at a place like Stanford. Don't even tell him that. The only argument against Stanford to be leading this discussion, who's actually having a bad time? It's a state of apathy. It's group of 5 level type stuff that we're talking about. They had a top 10 Notre Dame team in town, rivalry game, and they couldn't even get 30,000 paid fans, with probably a lot of Notre Dame fans that are willing to travel and make that trip, or, big, massive national fan base that, plenty of which are in California that could have made that trip. They had a home game earlier that month, classic clash against ACC rival Pitt. Will, they had 16,540 paid attendance at a Stanford home game in a non-COVID year. That is so unbelievably bad. This is not Auburn or Nebraska, fan level. Okay, not even close. They couldn't even begin to sniff that, and it's because of how bad the team is. Can you have that bad of a time when your own athletic department is unwilling to spend and more willing to follow like the 20th century Vanderbilt model of getting a conference media check and then using it to fund everything else? Can you really be that mad? So, Will, who is having a worse time in the 2020s? Auburn, Nebraska, or Stanford? Maybe
These
I should ask
guys,
Ashton Daniels about that question. He would
there you
probably
go.
know. Yeah.
This is just upsetting me. This is just making me mad. This is
Yeah.
apathy. I mean, I just they have this list of alums that I mean could literally rival Harvard, could rival Oxford. They could. I mean, Phil Knight also has a degree from Stanford. Nobody talks about that. I think that if they actually cared, and this is actually I've shouted this out before. I think Stanford could be a sleeping giant in the NIL era because if they could just get like 5 alums in a room, they could outspend 95% of college
Tiger
football.
Woods,
Off,
you know,
dude. Like just
John
then
Elway.
and that's the other part of it. That's the other part of it, Connor. They have enough NFL alums, John Elway, McCaffrey, talking about Richard Sherman, talking about dudes that if you just called them and said, "Hey, we're gonna kind of do like a player first thing over here. We already got Andrew Luck in here. You know, we're gonna get some guys in here that are gonna make it feel fun to be at Stanford," and they just do not care. And so, yeah, so they're number 4th in America in endowment at $41 billion, dude. So they just don't care. So like, why would I,
Yeah.
as a fan, care if they don't care? They could just slice off a little bit, a little measly billion of that endowment, you know, and we could make a case about, and I will later about Cal and how they're in the opposite situation. But if you just don't care, then there's apathy, and that's the opposite. Or I always joke about the opposite of love is not hate; it's apathy. This is apathy. This is not hate. Nebraska's living in hate.
I actually included Stanford instead of Cal. I did not include Cal on this list. Do you want to quickly make a case for why Cal should be? Because I think they've actually been a little bit better than probably the true bottom out part of this list, and they have fans that actually do seem to be pretty engaged and very much on the internet, and if like not necessarily had great moments in the 2020s, but they to me are in a kind of a different discussion with how they're treated and how like what college football fans think of them, because even like they're like how they've really leaned into who their identity is and like what their university is about politically speaking and all those different things, I think is more so it is like actually not apathy, and they don't really feel like they're coming from a place of pain in the way that I think others on this list are.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about Cal. They have this albatross of like this earthquake-proof stadium that is just sinking their athletic budget. They're like in the exact
It's a
opposite case.
sinkhole. It's just a giant sinkhole.
Yeah, it's like the type of it's like the money pit. It's like if you're like a young couple and you buy a fixer-upper house and you just keep finding stuff wrong with it. Like that's their situation to the point where like they're not ever going to get out of that. Like they truly are going to have to get some type of government bailout. It's like the most to your point about the California identity. This is like what people in the South specifically laugh at California about. It's like you literally have your stadium on layaway. Like the only reason they're letting you use it is because you need to get some return on investment. This is like the sewer system in Jefferson County and Birmingham was for a long time. It was like, how can you even get out from under this? It doesn't even make money. And so, like that being said, I think that puts them in a larger void because they're really in a disadvantageous situation in every negotiation they're in, with recruits, with conferences. I mean, the ACC, much has been made of the deal that they made with SMU, for instance, but they could make the exact same type of deal with Cal if, let's say an FSU or a Miami were to go to the table and say, we need more. Cal is the first one to go right there because they have no life raft. It's really the ACC just doing them a favor, and that's all they have going for them. So, yeah, I think that, they've had some wins and stuff here. They've also had, obviously, great NFL talent, but they just have no path to, actually physically own the things that are in their building.
Really exciting sophomore quarterback, though. That's going to be really fun to watch. And I do think that they could be in a different spot with Tosh Lupoi as their head coach. The way that they recruit a little bit different than the way that Stanford recruits. So I just like I looked at them side by side, and that's why I didn't include them, because I'm like, any argument that I can make against Cal, I can make against Stanford. You know what I mean? And I think it's worse, and the results have been worse. But yeah, I mean, I don't think they've been necessarily living La Vida Loca in the 2020s either. Shout out Ricky Martin. Sure.
Yeah, I just pulled up an article here. It says that they by their estimations will be paying off this football. This can't be real. They're paying off this football stadium until the year 2112.
That doesn't even exist. That's
Not
never
even a real.
happen.
We will be owned by robots by then. They're really banking on not a Stanford graduate creating those robots and a Cal graduate doing it. Because boy, howdy, is that just not a thing that can sustain anything.
Debt doesn't count if you never have to pay it. That's what I always say. It's like hospital debt. You don't really have to pay it. Yeah, you're fine.
This is like the bit from Schitt's Creek where they were just writing things off. You can't just not pay for your football stadium. What do you mean? This is insane. They're in hell.
All right, UCLA. Let's stay in the state of California.
It just makes
Um,
Lincoln Riley feel that much more affordable, right? It's like everybody else has it worse.
yeah, I actually didn't include USC for this too. Maybe I could have, but I think USC's actually won more games than anybody that's just been totally miserable.
They're just in a worldly different situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and like you had the Big Ten life raft, UCLA, Big Ten life raft as well. We can debate whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, but not enough people talked about how much of a mess UCLA was in the first part of the 2020s because obviously they get this in to join the Big Ten. It's like, hey, you get to come into the club. You're actually cool. Chip Kelly left UCLA to take the Ohio State OC job. And you could definitely make the case that he was getting fired the next year and that he was just picking his next move. And we're seeing that become a lot more common in college football. Two things can be true at the same time. One is that, like, that probably was his reality. Another truth is that UCLA's NIL budget in the early 2020s was a joke. I mean, I've talked to multiple coaches who have told me that it was laughable when they found out the money that they had devoted to football. Like truly, truly laughable. Like this has to be a type of disregard that they had for funding that. And it spoke to a lot of the issues that they've had the last 3 years with Deshaun Foster, 2 of those years with him. I think that has since improved their funding. It certainly has if you're getting someone like Bob Chesney, who is regarded in coaching circles as one of the top up and comers. But that's the type of misstep that can lead to obscurity in this era. And we talk about apathy. So, you've got that, like that's all part of kind of the past and I think the first half of the 2020s. And this Big Ten move has certainly complicated things because in theory you've netted more money, but it made it a lot tougher for your fans to travel. And you feel like anytime your team is playing in a road game in the Big Ten, like, great, cross country flight, this is going to suck. They're going to lose. Year two in the Big Ten, they were bottom 10 in the country in both scoring offense and scoring defense. Sure, you got Nico Yamaleava. Maybe with the new coach, you're going to unlock the 5-star talent. We'll see. Bob Chesney and his staff, I've heard this too, apparently thinks that they're like Signetti 2.0 with what
I
they've been
bet.
telling. Yeah, they're like, oh, we have the model for success. We were at James Madison too. We know what's going to work. They're apparently like telling people that behind the scenes, which is interesting. I'll wait and see. I'll wait and see on how that plays out. The argument against UCLA, they went 25-13 in the final 3 years under Chip, you know, and then you got the desired next step from the Pac 12 collapse. If you were left out to dry, maybe you'd be a leader in this discussion. But to me, your path back to relevance, it makes more sense than a lot of these others. And I could see that path with Bob Chesney. So I don't necessarily put them in that same class, but I will ask you, Will, who is having a worse time in the 2020s, Auburn, Nebraska, or UCLA?
This is a skip to me. I mean, again, they just don't
Yeah.
really care. What are your false Saturdays like? You live in LA, you're in everything school, you don't really care about football, you don't spend the money, you can't be too sad.
Okay. All right, let's move on to Purdue. I mean, Indiana just went 16-0 and won a national championship while you couldn't win a Big Ten game for the second consecutive year. Need I say more? You just end it right there. I will say, one of your best coaches ever, Jeff Brom, left you for his alma mater, and you've gone 7-30 without him. That's not quite UMass, but it's like not that far off. That included 2 and out for Ryan Walters, and then, in my opinion, overpaying Barry Odom to clean up his mess. That's still a work in progress. It is a mess that is certainly more complicated by being a very distant third in your own state behind Indiana and Notre Dame. Signetti's teams, if you're keeping track at home, they have outscored Purdue 122-3. So that's tough. The argument against Purdue, for half of the 2020s, you had a guy with a clue. Purdue had a real identity under Jeff Brom. And this might sound crazy because Purdue hasn't, like I said, beaten a Big Ten team since 2023. But Jeff Brom went 6-3 in Big Ten play in consecutive seasons. They beat a pair of top 5 teams in 2021 when they won 9 games. They then beat Tennessee in the Music City Bowl on a goal line stand ruling that everyone totally agreed on and hasn't been talked about since. I think a program who has had those highs, who hasn't had true embarrassment beyond just really bad football, is probably safe here from the leader of the pack. But I'll ask anyway. Will, who has had a worse time in the 2020s, Auburn, Nebraska, or Purdue?
As a guy who spent some time there, I mean, at this point, how much do you think they care about football Saturdays?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is still a desire to get back to that level.
Mhm.
And they could have great crowds under Brom. Like they had some fun times. I mean, RIP Rondale Moore. The Rondale Moore 2018 game against Ohio State is like an all-time. This is why you need to watch in a given Saturday type of game, where how on fire they were. That place more times than not has been pretty sad. But if you build it, they will come. That's actually not the line. It's if you build it, he will come. I watched Field of Dreams on Sunday night.
Great
Had a
movie.
little Father's Day tears rolling down at the
Aw.
end, you know. But I do think that fan base responds to winning in ways that I like. I think there is some sense of urgency. Obviously, what they've done with basketball with Matt Painter, like you can make the case that it's just strictly a basketball school now and they don't care as much about football. I still think they care. I definitely think that they care, but it's not a level of apathy like Stanford. I definitely wouldn't go to those places.
Yeah, I think that when your rival does what they've done, you really just wave a white flag and say, "Hey, we're the basketball school, you're the football school. Get off me. We're not talking about this." You know?
Yeah, maybe, and that's a good argument. Like it's a weird argument that it's played out this way
Because
because
they started as the football school, but ultimately it's all about agendas. I think they have an agenda they can cling to because they're not getting to Indiana levels for sure.
do you know how many national championships Purdue has
I actually
just
don't.
in sports? Look it up.
Is it 0? How about that? It was a Purdue slander on this beautiful day.
I'm just saying. I said a lot of nice things about Jeff Brom era Purdue. It's been bad since then. I got pushed back on Barry Odom for including him on our top 10 worst contracts. And that's one where I wish I could have had the context because a lot of people are like, oh, it's way too early. It's way too early. And my whole argument is like, I just think I think he was really overpaid for a job that I don't know that he's capable of doing.
Has he
I
ever
can,
been good? That's the thing. Is that was my point. Is like, oh, wait till he gets to vintage Barry Odom. Still bad. Anyway,
yeah, like I don't know that I could just give him credit for rebuilding Mizzou post Gary Pinkel. Like I don't think I looked at that situation and thought, oh my gosh, he totally rebuilt them and like got them back off the ground. Whereas like the situation at Memphis was a little bit different. I don't know. I have a tougher time with Barry Odom, and I think that there could definitely be some bad money that's been spent there. Okay, a few that we're just going to rip through here that maybe you'll have stronger feelings than I will, but I wanted to at least bring them up. Will Virginia Tech only one winning season in the 2020s,
but they're
and
so back though. They're
oh
so back though.
man, yeah. Look, it was a 7-6 season that came thanks to a Military Bowl win against Tulane. That's the lone winning season. Frank Beamer's two successors have both flamed out. They're on their third. Certain guy named Big Game James. I talked about how bad Brent Pry was in those close games. There's a certain level of torture when your fan base just knows in a close game that your team's just not going to get it done. And it's why Nebraska is certainly as tortured of a fan base as there's been in the last 10 years. It was the face, and Will, I don't know if you remember this too. Virginia Tech was the face of the it's so good to have fans back in the stands feeling of 2021 with the very first Enter Sandman that popped. And I think it was a Thursday night or a Friday night game against UNC. UNC was a top 10 team. Sam Howell was back, and they won that game. And then since then, they're 1-11 against AP top 25 teams, with the lone win being a Military Bowl win against Tulane. So only 2 wins against ranked foes in the entire 2020s for a program as respected as Virginia Tech. You've got the ACC split looming as the end of the 2020s approaches. And I think whether they admit it or not, Virginia Tech is very desperate to avoid getting left out of future realignment. They want to be, if there is any sort of super conference that forms, or hey, this team is getting that bid and this team's getting this, they don't want to be like, hey, we're on the outside looking in. They don't want to have any sort of relegation scenario because they've had this awful decade. And really that's what it's been. So the thing that's lacking though, and the reason why I didn't want to include them in the I guess, the tier 2, 21-28 versus the ACC. And it's not like you had to watch your rival become the face of the sport. And you've avoided scandal and real national embarrassment outside of like Diego Pavia coming into your building and pretty much putting curtains on the Brent Pry era. That's kind of it in terms of your embarrassment. So didn't want to include them in the earlier part of this discussion, but probably needs to be mentioned as a fan base that's just hoping and praying that James Franklin can be that guy.
Look, I mean, I know I've cautioned against ODing on Hopium, but I think at the end of the day, I think they won this coaching cycle. I would argue even more so than LSU, given their expectations. I think that I've talked ad nauseum about the DMV recruiting area and how whoever's controlled that area up that coast has done amazing things. You can think about Iverson, the Vicks, Jonathan Allen,
EJ Manuel.
Yeah, who's our guy that's at Clemson or that's at South Carolina that's super fast? I'm somehow blanking on his name. Big
Nick
old
Harbor.
Dude. Yeah,
Nick Harbor.
Another DMV recruit, right? And so I think that if you just take, I was talking to my stepbrother about this because he's like, "Oh yeah, what about James? Is James Franklin's overrated?" It's like if you just copy paste their results at Penn State with a 12-team playoff at VTech against a softer schedule, oh my God, they're so back. And that's all you really have to. He had gotten some good guys out of that region before, and so I think it's disappointing for this point in time, but it feels like they've already crossed the Rubicon.
If they were still in the Brent Pry era as a head coach, not as a defensive coordinator, then we'd be having a different discussion. But because they've moved on, it's weird for me to argue for James Franklin. I think that they're safe here. Maybe if the James Franklin thing bottoms out and they're really, really bad in the ACC and they're all of a sudden left out of realignment, then we can have that discussion later in the 2020s.
I should have said crossing the Delaware. My fault. Anyway.
How dare you not know your East Coast geography, Will? Rutgers. 0-15 against ranked foes in the 2020s. Yeah, bad. Rutgers would kill to have a moment like what Auburn had with Cadillac. You know, they haven't had that. Their best moment was getting Schiano back. That was really it. He's in year 7 of his tenure. He is still searching for his first ranked win. And the reason that Rutgers
He's been there 7 years. Jeez,
started in 2020. This tenure. Yeah. I think, what is he at? I don't know the total years. He's been there 15 years if we're including his first stint.
I just mean this time. It feels like that's still a fresh hire to be like, that was, yeah, I'm looking, it's all Greg Schiano. Wow. That is gross.
Yeah. And the reason that it's not as high as maybe what some would expect, you're not as dysfunctional as Rutgers has been historically. And you can kind of take the good with the bad with Schiano, with like your guy running the program. No scandal in the 2020s like what you had with Kyle Flood in 2015, which was kind of ugly. No coach firings in the 2020s. You've actually been to 3 bowl games in that stretch, though one of them was just because everyone was opting out of bowl games in 2021, whatever. As someone who watched more Rutgers football in the 2010s than any person should, I think they've been more watchable in the 2020s. I've talked about I like their skill players. Antoine Raymond's a good player. KJ Duff, fun player. And again, you have Schiano. So how bad of a time is it from that perspective? I'm asking Rutgers fans that, by the way, not Tennessee fans.
Sorry. I got to keep the mic muted. That was good. Yeah. I mean, it's, on the one hand, you could say, well, because like if you would ask me all I could been there, I'd say 4 years. It feels like it's been a time suck because I would
agree with you. It's gone by way quicker than I would have imagined.
I mean, I don't know. How old is Greg Schiano? Because that's the other
late
part
50s.
of it.
Is he late 50s? Is he like, let me guess, is he 58?
Yeah, let's see. 60. Actually, yeah, just turned 60 in June. So, if he's happy there, you get a couple more years out of him. Let's say, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe. I mean, he's obviously going to be do you build a Greg Schiano statue when he retires? Depends on how it ends, I guess.
He needs more. He needs more.
It's going to be the funniest statue discussion of all time. He's going to have like 30 seasons there and like 14 winning seasons.
Tennessee fans come in and just vandalize it.
It's like that's actually why you can't put up a Greg Schiano statue. Tennessee fans will just pop up like the children of the corn and start just spray painting it. Anyway, yeah, I mean, they were kind of in financial hell for a minute. I think that being in the Big Ten matters. I think they were able to get their guy, hold on to him, obviously. Again, it's all about expectations. I think they're just fine. The 3 bowl games matters. Again, like you don't really expect much out of Rutgers. They're, New Jersey's team and all that, but most of the guys up there are probably NFL fans. I think they're doing just fine.
Full media contract cut, too. That's the good thing. Yeah. First few years in the Big Ten where you weren't getting that and you're only getting a certain slice of the pie. I don't remember. I think that went through like 2018. I don't remember exactly. It was something like that. But getting a full media, piece of the pie, that's good. That's good living. Could be a whole lot
Yeah,
worse.
I think getting above that was a really big deal. Getting Shiado, having him stay, I think they've done enough to where I'm not like bummed about it, you know?
Yeah. West Virginia, similar to Rutgers, you brought the guy back that made you relevant in the Big East. So you feel better about that, even though last year wasn't great. Better QB situation for Rich Rod this year. Michael Hawkins Jr. coming over from Oklahoma. Really intrigued there. That's a nice little fit. He's got some John Rice Plumlee to his game. Very interested. But there was a hope that Neil Brown could be Jeff Brahmish. And instead, that didn't really work out. 4 ranked wins in the 2020s, just like Auburn, plus 4 bowl appearances. Probably not enough dysfunction or angst for me to say that this is the leader, but potentially in the hunt if things flame out with Rich Rod. And if Rich Rod is like 3 years and out, and even like the guy that brought you your golden years, it's since past his time, then we're talking about panic. And then all of a sudden you're looking up going, man, we can't even keep our head above water in the Big 12, which is supposed to be all over the place and anybody can have a year. Then all of a sudden you're going, oh boy, this could get real grim.
TBD on Rich Rod, I'm with you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, just to cover our bases, just to cover it, because there are people that are listening to this going, guys, you are 85 minutes into this podcast and you haven't asked the question, is LSU part of this? You can answer that question better than I could.
I mean, LSU, I think that the 2022 season does a lot of heavy lifting for LSU.
I think so too.
I think beating Alabama, making like that's a point that I've made about okay, we're talking crap with like Ole Miss, Mississippi State fans. Like, Brian Kelly won the SEC West more than Ole Miss has. Like that matters. Ultimately, beating Nick Saban at Alabama. Now, have you beaten Caleb DeBoer? No, but they did beat Nick Saban. I think that there have been enough. Here's the thing about LSU. I love T-Bob's comp of we are Greece, where yeah, LSU might be putrid, but they're going to have 1 or 2 signature wins every year that are just lit, that are just like you're beating a top 10 team because you play so many good teams. Yeah, you'll get your brains beaten by Alabama, right, in 2020, but you'll beat Florida. I think that's the thing about LSU is that when they decide to stop shooting themselves in the kneecap, which might be never, they actually can put together like at 1 game a year that can make you happy. And then also, Lane Kiffin hiring and just generally not rooting for Brian Kelly. I think that rooting for Brian Kelly bums you out a lot, obviously. I mean, if you guys want to see sadness, go back to the pod we did right after that where I look like a raccoon. My eyes are just so like sunk into my head. I'm just like, oh my God, this is hell. It's been bad. But that being said, to be fair, the championship happened after the year 2020, and there has been an SEC championship or a championship appearance in there, which not.
I was wondering about that. Yeah, like technically they did, even though we do not call it. LSU was not the 2020 national champs. They were the 2019 national champs. Having said that, from a calendar perspective for this discussion, they won their national championship in 2020. So that has to probably be part of it. And there's a reason why. I'm more just asking this question to see how you would answer it. But yeah, it's a fascinating sliding doors to 2022 because LSU winning on that play, the touchdown pass to Mason Taylor, or the 2-point conversion it was, right? 2-point conversion to Mason Taylor.
Yep.
Which, I mean, probably LSU's best post Joe Burrow moment, right? Like that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
You could make the case because that knocks Alabama out of the national title discussion. Bama tried to tell you that it deserves a spot in the 14 playoff, even though their best win was against a pair of teams from Mississippi that both had 4 losses. But if LSU doesn't beat Bama, does Bama win that national championship that year? Is the question that we'll never get an answer to, because yes, Kirby had already exercised those demons, beat Nick Saban in 2021, the previous year. There was a feeling that Georgia team wasn't quite as good, and Bama would have played for an SEC championship against Georgia. Now, maybe they would have both still made the playoff because obviously Georgia was undefeated at that point. But could Bama have won that and then gone on to win a national championship? And then Nick Saban retires after that instead of after 2023. We'll never know. But LSU played a part in that and played a part in what I think is in at least helped tell the story of that 2022 season wherein Bama was an overwhelming preseason number 1 and picked to win the national championship that year, only to not make the college football playoff with 2 regular season losses.
Yeah, and I mean LSU is just the most mercurial team because right, like I went to 3 straight Sunday openers that were each a different kind of disastrous. Like I get it. Like again, rooting for Brian Kelly was not that fun, but there were some moments in there. So I think that the ability to hang your hat on a couple of key Saturdays, like I said, 2022. Hey, say what you will about 2023, it was fun. Like, it was
You
to
got a
me, it
Jaden
was
Daniels
fun.
Heisman season
It like
too. Like
yeah,
it
the
was,
Jaden
yeah,
Daniels Heisman, I think alone. If you could give
yeah.
basically every fan base in the SEC, other than like Alabama, pretty much would take that exact year where you're like, yeah, we're kind of feisty. We have one of the best quarterbacks in college football history. Our defense is horrible, so we have to watch every second. I think there are more like fun years than not fun years. That was a fun year.
I agree. It needed to be said because if we didn't bring up LSU, people would have been like, "Oh, you're just trying to protect Will." No. Like we acknowledge all the parts of what's been a wild decade so far for LSU. So, who then wins the argument? Will, Auburn, or Nebraska? You're going with Nebraska, right? That would be your pick as we sit here today. This is June 24th, 2026.
I'm going to go Nebraska. I'm going to throw one fact in here. I remember one time at this point, 4 or 5 years ago, almost as long as the Shiano tenure, I talked to you kind of like off record, and I was like, hey, I was talking to my buddy Brady. He said Nebraska is never going to be back. And you just looked at me with this grim look in your eyes, like I just told you your dog died. And you're like, Will, do you know why Nebraska was so great back in the day? They invented weightlifting. Yeah, good luck doing that again. And that has really stuck with me. That is one of the most impressive stats I've ever heard outside of Iowa State hasn't won a conference championship since the Ottoman Empire was around. But yeah, I think that they are not going to invent weightlifting again. I think that they might just be in hell.
They might be. You said hell a lot. This wasn't the college football hell episode. You know that, right? Like
No, I know, but this is it's projecting forward. That's the part of it, is that we still have 4 years to go. So you
yeah.
can't, like it's like you're down here and we're gonna hold you down here with all of our might.
Auburn's my pick today. My pick for December 31st, 2029 to be the winner of this discussion is Nebraska. There's a separate story that I'll tell you about Nebraska one time with a certain marketing pitch that they had that has always rubbed me the wrong way for the last 9 years. We'll save that one for a different time. That's not as relevant for today. But needless to say, you will not have me, even though I spent time there and have friends that love Nebraska, and I don't wish pain on them. Like we've discussed this before, like root for your boys' teams and stuff like that. There are some things there that just have never quite sit right that I won't necessarily be banging the drum for them to be relevant. And you will not convince me to tweet about how great their uniforms are, even though they're just trying to distract you. That's what they're trying to do. Sorry. All right.
How far is Nebraska from retroactively claiming a title? We haven't even talked about that.
Ooh.
That's the main case for Auburn, is when you're retroactively claiming titles, you're in trouble.
They won a lot in legit ways. Well, drug testing was different then, so I don't know how legit it was, but a lot of steroids. There is probably going to be some of that in the future. Matt Rule is you're so right, Will. Matt Rule is definitely going to hang a future banner that he had nothing to do with. That's
I
coming.
bet one more mid Matt Rule year where they're trapped to the contract. Matt Rule is such a fake national championship guy.
Like, just time your watch to it. Some loss to Northwestern, and that banner's going up. He's like, I know we were 8-2 this year, but I found this guy.
History. I did some my own research. You know what I always say? Do your own research, kids.
Like, if they were 8-2 in this era, and this one guy from back then said that we had these metrics, and if you actually factor in yards per play. All right, Matt. Okay. Whatever you need to tell yourself and everybody else.
They had a 12-team playoff with the Big 8, buddy.
We would have all made it. All right, let's kick it to Tony Catalina. Great to talk some Aggies. He spent a lot of time working on a Marcel Reed piece, had really good access, so I wanted to dig into that with him, as well as some Mike Elko talk. So here is Tony Catalina. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Tony Catalina. Tony, I need to confess something to you before we get going here. I love a Massachusetts accent. Like, I really do. Like, one of my best buddies in the world, my guy Jackson Malnati, he has a thick Massachusetts accent, and it comes out just in very specific times. And I always tell him, I want more of that. I want you to say every single word with a thick Massachusetts accent. I think Brian Kelly could have learned a thing or two about that. I just want to start by saying that I hope that you hold on to it forever and that no amount of time in College Station or the South or wherever your career takes you, I hope no amount of time takes it away.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I was on the radio last week, and I've been in Texas College Station for like 2 years now. And I was on the radio, and when you get flowing, you find that like flow state. And next thing you know, I'm like not pronouncing my R's. And I'm like, wait a minute, I got to take a step back here. And I try to get my politically correct voice, but sometimes it comes out. And you know what? I think that's a reminder that I probably need to touch home base a little bit here soon.
Nah, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So you've obviously been on the beat, and you've gotten some pretty cool opportunities with what you've been doing. Your transition from the Statesman to 24/7. Basically, the last piece that you did for the Statesman was this all access piece with spending time around Marcel Reed, a guy that a lot of people are talking about going into this season. I always love doing these stories with people because you just get a different sort of insight and see kind of like what's an act, what's not really an act, what's performative, what's not. And maybe it's not a full, transparent type thing, but usually it's a pretty good window into who someone is. And I got to imagine you had some takeaways from your time with Marcel. What was your biggest takeaway from being able to spend that day with him?
Yeah, it's funny because that day started at 6 o'clock in the morning, and a large part of that story was telling the fact that like it was really an off day, right? Like this was the day they weren't supposed to practice. It was supposed to be walk through some light stuff, and he's in the building at 6:20 in the morning. They're doing hydration tests. He's got lifts. He's got he's meeting with coaches, and they're breaking down film from the practices and some scrimmages, and so just being able to be there with him for like 12 hours and just to see what like his day looks like, and like I said, in an off day was really fascinating. But what I came away from it most was just the Marcel that you see on TexAgs, and he's just like funny and he's goofy, and somebody who just like is very candid in his moments with the media. It's all really authentic. He's such a good kid. I mean, obviously a coach's son. His dad Rod raised him really well, him and his mom, and just well spoken. You could see him like when he's with his players, he's just a college kid, right? He's with his teammates, he's just a kid. But as soon as Joey Lynch, the QB coach, walks in the room, he's yes sir, no sir. He's just really respectful, understands it. And when you get to see him lock in and really study, he's just a student of the game, right? You wouldn't expect anything less from a guy who grew up around a Division I program and his dad just kind of bringing him along in that ride. So my biggest thing is he's a kid who's very aware of the conversation about him. He understands what the end of last year looked like, what is challenging him, or what is expected of him in this second season as a full-time starter. Just really impressed by his work ethic because again, this is a lot of the stuff that these kids would rather be at home, or you're in College Station, you're the king of the castle in College Station. He can go and do whatever he wants, but he takes his time to really hone in on that craft and just I just see an authentic kid, a kid who really wants it, understands what needs to be done, and he's really looking to take another leap this year.
I think he has to. I think he'd be the first person to admit there are some pretty defined strengths and weaknesses with his game. And I did my SEC quarterback rankings for TexAgs, and he's the biggest lightning rod of conversation probably of anyone on that list. And I had settled on 6 for him, which I was kind of wondering how that was going to be received. And you had some people that are like, "Oh my God, he shouldn't even be top 10 in the SEC," and then others who are like, "How is he not top 3?" And that just kind of tells you where people are at with him. And I think that people are kind of wondering what's his ceiling. Because if he doesn't improve in the intermediate, it's going to be rough. He can't have so many turnover-worthy plays in non-blitzing situations. Like, again, the weaknesses are pretty defined. What do you think his ceiling is this year in 2026?
I think you got him right where he's at. I think, in my opinion, I probably have him at 6 too. I think there's conversation to put him at 5, but I probably wouldn't go much higher. And if you wanted to go a couple spots lower, like I'm here for the combo. But that being said, yeah, I think for him, you're right. It's the decision making. It's making the right read. It's kind of being more concise with his decision making, understanding that it's okay to take that intermediate shot instead of going for the deep shot that's going to make it 3rd and 10, right? Go and get 4 and 5. You can't go broke taking a profit. And I think with Holman Wiggins, and I know he's a huge question mark about this team too, is just what is this offense going to look like in a first-year play caller? But every time we got a chance to talk to him, he's like, hey, Marcel's going to have a hand in this offense. He's going to have a hand in what we look like. We're going to build it around his strengths. We're going to build it around this team's strengths. And just more so in that, is he's going to build it in a QB-friendly structure, right? He wants it to get the ball out quick. He wants to maybe 1 or 2 reads, get the ball out in space, let your playmakers make plays. I think the culmination of being another year stronger, another year wiser, and having a QB coach, offensive coordinator who wants to build this around him to be successful, I think we're going to see an organic tick. But as far as the ceiling goes, I really don't know if there is a cap on it. I mean, he's working with Jeff Christensen, a renowned QB coach. He's believed that he's going to take another 5 to 10% leap from when I talked to him. He said he took a 10 to 17% leap last year. So if that's the progression in a year 2 as a starting quarterback, I think it's the ceiling.
Tony, great to see you, man. I'll ask a little bit deeper down the same road of that question, right? When Reed has struggled, it has been as a passer. We know he's a dynamic runner, and that's something that has kind of gone back and forth over the course of his career. When it breaks down for him, we kind of know how that looks, right? So you spoke on the most ideal version of him and this offense. Are they trying to build him into a Manning type passer? Are they going to try to lean on his legs? Like, what does the perfect version of Marcel Reed look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, I think for him, it's kind of taking the governor off. I think last year they kind of built it around, well, we can't get him hurt. We can't lose him. Like, let's not put him in situations where he can put himself in risk. I think now as, a rising junior, a veteran quarterback, somebody who has some, skin in the game now, they're going to get him out in space. They're going to roll him out. They're going to condense the field, cut the field in half, make him have easier reads, let him use his legs. That run against LSU where he rolled out completely, and then took off. Like, that's the stuff you can't prepare for. I don't care who you are. A guy who's looking for a deep shot and then he can turn on the burners and go 60 yards for a touchdown. They just got to let him be him. And I think, to their credit, they were trying first-year quarterback. What is this kid's strengths? What can he do? Let's try to keep it within structure here. But I think what we realize with Marcel is he has quality arm talent, but he's best when he's out there and he's kind of just playing ball. And I think that's something Holman Wiggins really wants to hone in on. It's hard to kind of quantify what that looks like, but if you just let the kid go be a kid, I think he has a chance to be his best version of himself.
We've seen the inherent risks of the LSU fan asking about Marcel Reed, because that's exactly when he looked the best, was against LSU. Great. Okay, I do remember that. No, but that being said, let's pivot to Elko for a second. Obviously, he's a defensive-minded coach. That's where he's hung his hat a lot of the time. They've lost a lot of that side of the ball via the draft. It's a good problem to have, right? So what do you think the identity of this team overall is going into 2026?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be tough, right? I think with Lyle Hemphill in the fold, there's probably going to be a little bit more zone principles. I think he's going to have his little fingerprint on the defense, so to speak. But make no bones about it, this is Mike Elko's squad. This is his unit. I think they're going to be creative in their pass rush. I think they're still going to try to get after the quarterback. They've been middling at best at stopping the run over the last first 2 seasons. They got to find a way to be better there. I know losing Damian Stanford for however long that is, the linebacker who's a captain now, that's not going to help. Obviously, that's going to hinder them at some point, no matter how long he's out for. But they got DJ Hicks. They feel really encouraged by a former 5-star defensive tackle in the middle there. They got Ray Coney, who's super productive at Tulsa. I just think they want to be physical. They want to be hard-nosed. And if you look at this team from 2024 when USC was carving them up in the Las Vegas Bowl and they couldn't stop the pass, to say that their strength now is the secondary is a crazy testament to what they've been able to build and grow and just find in the portal, because arguably their safeties, they're going to have 2 veteran returners, and they got Desricks along with Ricky Gibson. Like, they're going to be able to defend the pass. So how can they get after the quarterback? Can they use that to their advantage? And I expect Elko to find a plan that works great for them.
This team's got to be able to run the ball. I think all the questions we can ask about them, you'd feel better if one of those things that was a constant was just, you can rely on them to be able to pick up 200 yards in an SEC game and do so on the ground. I have held on to my Reuben Owens stock. I had a lot of it towards the end of 2024. And I think last year it felt more like a get his legs under him type of season. I think it's pretty noteworthy that they didn't sign a running back out of the portal, and they're really young in the backfield behind him. If you look at all the freshmen and, like second-year guys they're rolling out there, what should we expect from him? Because he's kind of going to be left out of these top-tier SEC running back conversations, understandably so. But as someone that comes in, I think still with a lot of potential and now maybe a little bit healthier and feeling like himself, like, what do you think the ceiling is, to ask the same question that I asked of Marcel Reed?
Yeah, I think me and you have a lot of the same things. I think we saw the same vision for Reuben Owens. He's somebody who's dynamic, obviously a guy who can get the ball and hit the home run shot. He's somebody who is just a supreme athlete in that sense. But I think some of the conversation around him, you're right, just trying to get his feet back, trying to find ways to get healthy. But his interior, the way he runs the football in the interior was more impressive than I thought. Like, I think when you watch the film and you look at some of the deep analytics, like he was more productive off the hip of the right guard and the left guard than Le'Veon Moss was, which is really, really impressive and really eye-opening when you look at that. So I say that to say you're right. They don't have much behind them as far as proven talent, but Jamario Murrow, a lot of people are expecting a big step up from him. KJ Edwards, a true freshman, is somebody who was really flashed in the spring, and I think there's high hopes for him to be a year one guy. But this group, like you said, goes with Reuben Owens. I think he's somebody who can take the lead first year as a guy who's going to be the RB1. Like, he knows it. This is his group. This is his unit. It comes with a different edge this offseason to get ready and prepare for that. He did lead the team in rushing yards and attempts last year because Le'Veon Moss was banged up dealing with injuries, but it's a huge year for him. I mean, for people like you and me who rightfully so had stock in a kid who thinks that he can be a really good football player. I think there isn't, like I said, with Marcel, it's hard to put a ceiling on it because I don't even think we really scratched the surface for how good he could really be. It's really going to be about him. I spoke to Troop Taylor, the running backs coach for Texas A&M, and he kind of said he issued him a challenge, right? Like, this is a guy who we're going to lean on, we believe in, but if what they do and how they can run the football is going to come on his back, now go and take it and embrace that moment.
Tony, I love that you shouted out the USC game in the last answer there. 2 years in a row, I actually said right around the LSU game, hey, this year's a success for Elko. It kind of doesn't matter what happens from here. And then both years, something has happened, right? A loss to Texas, bowl game loss, whatever it would be. And it feels like they've gotten to this point where it's like, wow, this is such an amazing turnaround. And then they've just kind of backslid a little bit. And so looking into this 2026 season, right? Like, how can they avoid fading as the year goes on?
No, I mean, that's the number one thing, right? You look at the way they started last year, 11-0, lose their two most important games. You can't lose in Austin, and then you can't lose in Miami. And, it's just the way that season ended is what the bad taste in the mouth of this fan base is. It's just what it is, right? And so I think that's the next step. We saw this team go from 8 wins to 11 wins, college football playoff appearance, hosting a game. Like, there's a lot of positive momentum. They even looked good at the front end of November, right? So you felt like that was some things that they were kind of resurrecting in real time. But then at the end of the year, it's a familiar finish for this team and this program. Elko's if he's going to take the next step, and I think that arguably year 3 is probably the most important year in the Elko tenure, in my opinion, right? Because you saw the progress, you see them make the playoffs, but this year is the year you try to put the country on notice and say, hey, that wasn't a flash in the pan. This wasn't a one-off. We're going to be a consistent contender. This is a team. This is a program you're going to have to worry about every single year. So, and in order to do that, you're going to have to beat Texas, right? You're going to have to find ways to be successful at the end of the year. Schedule in the SEC is not getting any easier. You're going to play 9 conference opponents. You're going to play tough. You're going to play Alabama, Oklahoma, both on the road. Like, this is just not going to get easy. So to that point, there isn't just one way to do it, but to simplify it is just win games when it matters, right? I even talked about that. You got to find ways to win games that matter. And I don't know if any game the Friday after Thanksgiving is bigger than that one.
Do you think there's something inherently about Elko or the way this team prepares? Do they overtrain? What is it that's led to that 2 years in a row, you think?
It's interesting. I wonder, some of it is coincidental. Some of it is just meeting, a buzzsaw. I really do think there's something about whenever A&M Texas comes together, it doesn't matter what sport. There's just these emotions. There's this energy about it that just, obviously it's a big deal to the fan base. It's obviously a big deal to the state. It just feels like the moment gets really intense. And I think even somebody from Massachusetts could feel that pressure in that room, right? They can feel it. I know people, I've talked to people, and, I laugh at this, but I'm like, hey, you go 11-1 and every year and lose to Texas and make it to the playoffs. Are you happy with that? And there's people that push back on that. I'm like, I don't know if I would push back on that, but I don't know if there's one thing or the other. I think the bowl game against Las Vegas, I give them a little grace. It wasn't the team that they rolled out there all year, but flat out losing to Miami, losing to Texas, that's something they're going to have to find a way to get better at.
Will was looking for a very specific answer there. You don't know that, but I do. And he was looking for a very specific answer related to a certain strength coach that left LSU for Texas A&M and whether or not they're overtrained.
No, that was an open-ended question. I just wanted to get perspective.
Totally. Totally. You talk about Holman Wiggins and the first-time play caller. element of what goes into this. And, I think it's a massive question mark, because you can find cases in college football where a first-time play caller has been fine and it's worked out great. And then you find others where it flames out and you're just kind of left wondering, why did they do this internal promotion? When, even though I think down the stretch last year, there were some tough moments for Colin Klein as a play caller, even though I think we all felt really good about him and the positions that he was putting Marcel Reed in. But what is the feeling like now, knowing that kind of looms and we're really not going to know? I don't know that we're going to know how good he is as a play caller until like maybe even late October. Like, it's going to take a while for us to feel like he's either got this and he knows the best way to maximize this offense, or he doesn't.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's really hard, and I'm totally with you, because you're not going to be able to get a definitive answer on who Holman Wiggins the play caller is until we're in the mix here for conference play. But talking to people in the program, even asking Elko about it, like, there's a full confidence in it. Now, they're going to say that publicly, they're going to say that, but ultimately, from what I've seen from Holman Wiggins, is he's a teacher, he's an educator, he's a player's coach, but demands excellence. So, like, some of the different things, Colin Klein was a great coach, somebody I was defending a lot of his decisions last year too. I thought there was rhyme or reasons for even the things that didn't work out last year. I can understand, but when I see I see Wiggins, it's just a different demeanor. His attention to detail when it comes to, he'll pull a guy off a drill and explain why he's telling him to teach this. He'll pull Marcel aside and say, hey, I'm looking for this. Or it's just the attention to detail. He knows exactly what he wants. And then when you talk to him, you say, hey, like, what do you want this offense to look like? And he won't pigeonhole himself, right? He won't put himself in a box. We talked to Ashton Bethel Roman, the third-year wide receiver. He's talking about air raid principles. Then you talk about, hey, we'll lean on the run when you talk to Wiggins. And then you said, I want to be in 11 or 13 personnel, or I want to be in, 3 wide. And so you're talking to him and you're like, oh, he's going to do what is ever dictated needed in that week to week in that season, right? Like, this year's team may be a pass for first team. And people may look at the guy and be like, oh, wide receiver coach, he's going to sling it around the field. Hey, man, if KJ Edwards and Jamario Murrow are studs next year, maybe they're going to ground and pound the ball. So I think the best thing I can say for him is he seems open, he seems malleable, but the things that are non-negotiables, he's very clear and precise about it with his team.
I mentioned that Will was looking for a specific answer related to a strength coach. I was just looking for the answer to whether or not he was going to call a million pass plays when the wind is clearly howling at ridiculous rates. That's all I was looking to find out.
Well, when you miss a 21-yard field goal, that you think the wind isn't great there.
Yeah, look, it was rough. It was rough, a few of those games on the stretch. Let's get you out of here with a record prediction and whether you think it'll be worth it for a playoff bid. Go any way you want with it. How does this season play out? The very pivotal year 3 for Mike Elko.
Yeah, I'm probably tabbed as one of the more optimistic people, outside, of some, others that may be a little bit more, up on it than I am. But I look at this team, and obviously there's no doubt about it. The schedule is tougher. 9 SEC teams. They got to travel to Tuscaloosa. They travel to Norman. You can't look at this squad and not say that it's going to be more of a challenge. But with that being said, I believe in Elko and I believe in what he's doing, right? I think when you look at the 4 most pivotal games, LSU, Oklahoma, Texas, and I know I'm missing one there, but
at Bama.
At Bama, yes. Sorry. I said it enough times I forgot. But, if you can find a way to split those, I think you're in business. If you lose all 4, then we know what the deal is, right? They could go 8-4 if they miss all 4 of those. So I'm going to settle in right now and say I think 9-3 is realistic. I think 9-3 some people probably won't be happy with that, but I think 9-3 is a real possible number. And if things start to swing your way, I could see 10-2, but it's got to really have to go their way to find that.
Okay, last one. 9-3. It doesn't include a playoff berth, but it includes beating Texas. Would that year be better than last year?
You know me. I think I said playoffs and lose to Texas every year is probably a successful year. But there's people here who would probably take 9-3 with, miss the playoffs and beat Texas. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think there's a sector of the fan base that would.
I don't know, man. Sometimes just being able to get that one against your rival, it matters a
Yeah.
whole lot more. It
I
really
just
does.
I think the best part, I mean, because I've been in the room or been on the field when they've lost to Texas and Kyle Field, and you're like, well, there goes the SEC championship opportunity. Then the next year they lose in Austin, and quickly they're like, all right, well, we got the playoffs. Like, let's change. I think that mentality and mindset was probably a little more comfortable than the 2024 version of the loss.
Yeah, I'm just picturing a world in which like an 8-3 A&M team beats Texas, and it's like that's their Super Bowl, and it's like,
Yeah.
hey, they don't care about not making the playoffs. It's like they have that, and then maybe even a 10th win in a bowl game, and all of a sudden it's like it's a better season than the 11-0 start, which is just it's funny how college football works. Tony, this has been a lot of fun. We'll have to do this again in the regular season, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, let's close with some lad of the week. Who you got?
This one to me feels a little bit unanimous with a shout out to Skip Johnson and the boys at Oklahoma. Great job winning another consecutive championship for the SEC. Conference has fallen off the face of the earth. As we all know in sports, we can't pay players. So
7 consecutive national championships. Has the SEC ever done that in anything
no,
before?
and guess what? LSU is the only not repeat, but like multi-time in there. It's actually so insane. The 2 Mississippi schools, Vandy, 2 LSU, Oklahoma. Like the way that the conference is just built to butt everybody in baseball has been, like I've told you guys, watch some college baseball. Like I was in Hoover watching this Oklahoma team lose to a bad LSU team and going, why were we even here? This team is useless.
11th in the SEC and won a national title. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, they like truly. I think they lost one more game after that, or maybe 2 with it. Lost the other day, but it's just crazy that any team in the SEC could truly win it. So shout out to them. But my nearly unanimous lad of the week is Norway striker Erling Haaland, a just absolute whale of a man. The more that I learn about him, the more I like him, right? He is a guy that is just so terminally online. He's built like what AI would design as a Viking athlete. I've loved watching Norway. Like you know how the World Cup goes. You root for America, and you kind of pick a secondary team. You're like they could go a little bit farther. And America this year actually kind of has a shot, so I shouldn't say that too loud. But the way that they do the row is so sick for Norway. I think that like leaning on that Viking heritage and leaning on that dude who just runs like a gazelle. He's the size of an NFL middle linebacker. He's so funny. He's so gracious. I mean, maybe we'll find something problematic about him, but everything he's posted, everything he's been about seems to be the right things. And he's the type of guy that's always getting dirty play happening against him because he's so massive and guys, pulling on his shirt and everything. And he never really pouts. He's just a great team guy. And so I think, he's only 25 from when I looked it up. And so it feels like I've been hearing about him forever, but just it feels like a guy that's going to make a lot of money off of this World Cup. He already has 4 goals scored as I sit here today. And it's going to be many more so far than Cristiano Ronaldo, which has been very fun to watch.
So put this in football terms for me, like American football terms for me. What non-kicking position would he play?
I mean, striker is your closest to like a quarterback or a middle linebacker. So he's one of these. He's almost like a Josh Allen. He's very similar to a Josh Allen, but a Josh Allen that wins on the big stage.
Who is Norwegian and knows it. He's been. You're right. He's been very online. I feel like I've seen a lot of pictures of that dude that have just come across my feed. He's got like the pose that's been very like synonymous as well. And yeah, I mean, would love to see what he could do on an NFL field. Am I right?
Yeah, he's one of the few. I've noticed this as I've watched a little bit more F1, a little bit more soccer. In America, we reward the giant athletes. Like, I feel like Michael Jordan could still beat me up today, even though he's past his prime and everything. Yes. Whereas like the soccer players, like the Messis, stuff like that, they're a little bit smaller. They value finesse out there. And Haaland, like so many people like, of course it's Haaland that catches on in the USA. Yeah, he's awesome. He's built like a D end. He's running people over politely.
So D end is your final answer.
Oh man, he could play some D end. Like him personally would play D end, but in terms of his role on the soccer field as a quarterback.
Love it. All right. My lad of the week is Matt Miller. And for those who saw this unfortunate news, he posted an update the other day about this, and really, really sad. He was involved. For those who don't know Matt Miller, by the way, ESPN NFL draft analyst. We've had him on this show probably like last time we had him on, I think would have been like 5 years ago. He's big time now. He used to be a Bleacher Report, NFL draft scout on Twitter. Very, very well known within football communities, and was involved in a very scary car crash in which he had to be airlifted to the hospital and had to have an emergency amputation of his left arm. if you saw the picture of his car afterwards, you're like, oh my God, how in the world did he survive that? Like really, really scary. And I think anybody that has known Matt and his story in the past has seen how inspiring he is as just a guy that doesn't have the NFL background. Like even like a Field Yates or something like that, or like a Todd McShay. Like Todd McShay briefly played college football, or like Field had really good connections playing lacrosse, and then worked in the NFL before he did the ESPN stuff. And like, not to say that their paths are more traditional, but Matt is just someone that grew up idolizing Mel Kiper and just said, I love the NFL draft and I want to be Mel Kiper, and did not have the football background in the way that so many do. And it's just worked his tail off to get to this place where now he is a mainstay on that desk during the NFL draft. And that is a really, really big deal. And especially for someone that doesn't come from, the traditional background in the way that he does. And I know that he has inspired a lot of people to follow their passion. And if you truly believe that you can do something, go out there and just start doing it, start making content and be that person. And my only hope with seeing this is that he's going to inspire a lot more people who have physical limitations to go out and do great things. Because I hope that Matt will be able to make a full comeback, and that we're still going to see him as a part of ESPN's draft coverage and much, much more, because he's got so much insight and knowledge, and that guy can just remember people that you're just like, oh my God, like your Rolodex is kind of crazy with the things that you can pull out about specific people. I was reminded of one of our college friends, her name's Lindsay Erdoti, and I met her. Lauren and I both met her while we were working on the newspaper staff, and she was on management the year that Lauren was, and like sat across from us. And a year before we had met her, she was involved in a car crash that involved her having to have an emergency amputation as well. And she now lives without part of her arm. And last year, fast forward to like last year, we were at her wedding, and it was this beautiful wedding and stuff like that. She's found, someone that like really, really makes her happy. And she said some other things in her life that have just been very unfortunate that I won't get into. But it was a reminder of like, she had this catastrophic thing happen to her. And now I think he's doing a lot of good in the world and like showing people you can do very, very great things. She's, great journalist in Indianapolis, and is living a happy life. And my hope for Matt is that he uses his platform to inspire others and to be able to continue to live out his passion in the way that he has for a really long time. So just an awful thing that when you see it, you're like, oh my God, like really? Like you endured something like that crazy? Like I had no idea until I saw the update. It just absolutely gutted for him, a father of two, and hope that he has good days ahead, and hope that he can inspire many people.
Matt Miller, this is probably the highest praise I could give for someone. He's one of the very short list of people that has cooked me on Twitter into respecting him. So
that's hard to
this
do,
is about 2018, 2019. I was really obviously a fantasy football sicko, didn't have a lot going on in my life at that point. I was very high on rookie OJ Howard. And usually when I get into it with people, I have a little bit of insight. And he was like, look, even if you like OJ Howard, which I don't like him as a rookie. Tight ends don't produce in that level. Hit me with all these stats. You know me. I was like, you don't know. You didn't watch him. He did the check back in a year. Check back in a year, and guess who was right? Not Will. And so I remember being like, all right, game recognized. You got me. You're smarter than me. You're right. And so since then, I've kind of like followed his career and respected him a ton because he got into the weeds with me and cooked me on my terms, which is really hard to do. And then I went, I really hope this guy goes great places. Like I said, followed his career and have really rooted for him since then. So really just a tragic thing to have happened. But to your point, he's a tough guy. He's been around, and he didn't come this far to come this far.
Yeah, and hope that whatever road awaits him with recovery, he just absolutely crushes it. And man, what an awesome thing! Like I know I kind of make fun of some of the manufactured moments with the NFL draft at times, because it really just does seem like, hey, they're desperate for something on day 3, and they're really gonna ham this up. Seeing him on the desks next year, I don't know. Again, I don't want to say that that's imminent or anything like that. I have no idea what his path to recovery looks like, but seeing him on that desk, if and when that happens, would be an incredible, incredible sight for someone who's involved in what is obviously a life-changing experience. And I hope we get to see that. I will absolutely root for that. I will root for Matt. I have always rooted for Matt. even as he has continued to grow his platform and do just tremendous things with ESPN. So yeah, hope he's able to recover. Hope his family is doing okay, because man, what a scary thing to endure. Seriously, like look at the picture of that, of his car. And you're like, how did a person get out of that? Like that to me is like such a hard thing to comprehend. And I just am always amazed that can possibly happen. But yeah, very, very scary situation for Matt. All right. I have said it before. I will say it again. Please email us, theogkickoff@gmail.com. If you are someone that is rooting for a team and you just have not had a very good time in the 2020s, we would love to be able to hear from you. Please leave with your caffeine choice. And also, if you have not listened to the Conor O'Gara Show every Friday morning on The Next Round on YouTube, subscribe there. Subscribe to the OG Kickoff on all of our platforms. Follow us on Twitter @CJ O'Gara, @GoSoHard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.